on recess regarding the passage of the Water Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 33 of 2023. Pursuant to the said standing order, I now report the message. Pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 41.1 and 142 of the National Assembly Standing Orders, I hereby convey the following message from the National Assembly. Whereas the Water Amendment Bill, National Bill number 33 of 2023, was published via Kenya Gazette Supplement number 108 of 4th July 2023 as a bill seeking to amend the Water Act 2016 to operationalize public-private partnerships in the water sector and to provide for supply of bulk water in counties by waterworks development agencies established under the Act. And whereas the Water Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 33 of 2023 was passed by the National Assembly on Wednesday, 23rd August 2023 with amendments and in the form attached herewith. Now, therefore, in accordance with the provisions of Article 110 of the Constitution and Standing Orders 41.1 and 142 of the National Assembly Standing Orders, I hereby convey the said decision of the National Assembly to the Senate. I thank you. The next order, Clerk. You'll do the greetings later, Senator Sotsi. Take your seat. We've got business to transact. Honorable Senators, I have the following communication to make. I would like to acknowledge the presence in the Speaker's Gallery this afternoon, a visiting delegation from the Parliament of Uganda, comprising members of the Committee on Equal Opportunities and its Secretariat. The delegation is undertaking a benchmarking visit with their counterparts in the Senate. Now, Honorable Senators, I request each member of the delegation to stand when called out so that you may be acknowledged in the Senate tradition. The Honorable Aliek Judith, the chairperson. The Honorable Asen Dokas, the deputy chair. The Honorable Ephraim Biraro, member. The Honorable Mukasa Aloysius. The Honorable Otokol Sam. The Honorable Kunihira Agnes Aboli. The Honorable Kayogera Yona. The Honorable Adongo John. The Honorable Mr. Owili Geoffrey. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to the delegation, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I will allow the Majority Leader and the Minority Leader each under 1 minute to say words of welcome to the visiting delegation.
Asante Bwana Spika. Bwana Spika, nataka kujiunga pamoja na wewe ili kuwakaribisha waheshimiwa kutoka bunge la Uganda. Tumekuwa nao katika mkutano hivi leo, Bwana Spika, na tumeweza kugeuziana mahusiano ya hizi nchi mbili. Bwana Spika, ni jambo zuri ya kwamba wamekuja hapa kuona vile tunavyofanya kazi, pia kujijulisha mambo fulani ambayo pengine wanaona tofauti ya sisi na wao huko katika bunge lao. Bwana Spika, tumeona mambo mengi yamefanana. Lakini Bwana Spika, kusema ile ya kweli ni kwamba hawa wabunge wa bunge la Uganda ni kwamba wametushindia kitu kimoja. Wao kiranja wao akiandika barua akisema kwamba katika hii kamati natoa huyu, naweka huyu hapa, naweka huyu hapa, naweka huyu hapa. Bwana Spika, kule yule spika huwa hana la njia yoyote ya kufanya isipokuwa tu kusema ya kwamba hiyo imekubaliwa.
Kindly welcome the delegation.
Asante Bwana Spika. Kwa hiyo mimi nina imani ya kwamba hawa ndugu zetu kutoka Uganda wamekuja hapa na wamefurahi vile wametuona tunaendelea kufanya kazi. Wako hapa katika siku 2-3, wataendelea kujifundisha, wataendelea kuona, na nataka kuambia ndugu zangu maseneta tuweze kuhusiana nao ili tuwe na uhusiano mwema baina ya nchi yetu hii na nchi ya Uganda, na uhusiano pia uendelee kama vile Seneta Mundigi husema ya kwamba yeye katika hizo harakati amefaulu sana. Asante Bwana Spika.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I join you together with the rest of our colleagues in welcoming the visiting delegation from the Parliament of Uganda, our good friends and neighbors. Mr. Speaker, Kenya continues to have great relationship with our neighbors, Uganda. A friendship that is founded on great sacrifice from both countries, ensuring that our people live in harmony. And on many occasions, Mr. Speaker, where there have been disagreements, we have solved them amicably. And therefore, without a shadow of doubt, Mr. Speaker, I can declare, and I know this for a fact, that amongst all our neighbors, Uganda still stands very tall, Mr. Speaker, because on many occasions, if there's a country amongst even the East African nation that Kenyans feel at home, they interact from the food to the culture to in all aspects of life, Mr. Speaker, it is in the beautiful country, the Pearl of Africa, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, I welcome this visiting delegation. Mr. Speaker, just one final comment is that over the years, as we have played the Parliament of Uganda in the annual East African Parliamentary Games, the last 2 years, Mr. Speaker, all our matches have ended in a draw. We drew 1-1 in Arusha, Tanzania in 2021. Last year in Juba, South Sudan, the game ended in a barren draw. Mr. Speaker, I want to assure them that this time we have prepared well, and we will down the Parliament of Uganda. So tell your captain, my good friend, the Honorable Mohamed Nsereko, member for Kampala Town, that we are coming for them, together with your team manager, the Honorable Minister Peter Ogwang, that this time Parliament of Kenya will take down Uganda. Otherwise, I do welcome them, Mr. Speaker, and I hope they enjoyed the full duration of our stay. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Mogeni, under 1 minute, please.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to join you in welcoming the delegation of the 7 honorable members who are benchmarking from our neighbor, Republic of Uganda. And Mr. Speaker, I want to report to the House that under the chairmanship of our chair, Chair for Labor, we had a very fruitful engagement with the delegation from Uganda. And you know, let's pride ourselves as Kenyans. There is a lot that the members from Uganda, honorable members from Uganda, were impressed about our country, Kenya. They were impressed to learn that in Kenya, we have a court that is set under Article 162 that is dedicated purely in dealing with labor issues. So we are trailblazers in East Africa, and they were also impressed, Mr. Speaker, with the facilities that we have as the Parliament of Kenya, courtesy of Parliament and the Honorable Clerk. We hosted them to a very hearty lunch, and they were impressed to find matoke, a delicacy in Uganda. And we hope that this integration, this is the way to go, Mr. Speaker. When you see a delegation from our brother country, Uganda, visiting us, it also, by extension, invites us as Kenyans to also visit the Parliament of Uganda so that we can learn. Mr. Speaker, I was impressed to learn that in their country, committees don't serve for the entire tenure of 5 years. You are appointed to serve for 2.5 years. After 2.5 years, you again get a fresh appointment from your whip. So this is very good. We're impressed. We wish you a fruitful stay in the city of Nairobi, And we appointed Senator Mundigi to lead the social interaction, and he tells me that tomorrow there will be a dinner between a few Kenyan members of parliament and the Ugandans. When you go back to Uganda, please say hi to our Museveni. We are happy with what he's doing with LGBT. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Senators, I also have this communication to make. I would like to acknowledge the presence in the Speaker's Gallery this afternoon, a visiting delegation from the County Assembly of Kisumu. The delegation comprises 9 members and 4 officers of the Committee on Delegated Legislation who are on a benchmarking visit with their counterparts in the Senate. Now, Honorable Senators, I request each member of the delegation to stand when called out so that you may be acknowledged in the Senate usual tradition. The Honorable Mariam Abeid, the chairperson. The Honorable Peter Obaso. The Honorable James Omolo. The Honorable Harriet Bodo. The Honorable Samuel Dede. The Honorable Mickey Ochieng. The Honorable George Abaja. The Honorable Regina Kizito, the Honorable Moses Ochele, Pastor David Ochieng, Ms. Brenda Chasi, Mr. Zachary Nyalalo, and lastly, Ms. Jacqueline Otieno. On behalf of the Senate, and on my own behalf, I extend a warm welcome and wish you a fruitful visit here in the Senate. I will call upon the Senator for Kisumu to say welcoming remarks under the. So I will allow the youth leader to take that part. Kindly proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to welcome a delegation from Kisumu Dala. Mr. Speaker, it is a great honor for us as a Senate that we have a delegation from Kisumu choosing to come to Senate instead of going to the other house. Mr. Speaker, this is a great house. This is a place to benchmark, and this is a place where there is great debate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hope during their stay here, they will have an opportunity to learn what we do here in the Senate, how we actually take care of their interests, because that is part of our function, Mr. Speaker, to protect the interest of the counties, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Kisumu, where they come from, is the commercial center, natural commercial center of East Africa. And Mr. Speaker, it is where I was born and brought up, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very, very proud to receive a delegation from my home county of Kisumu, Mr. Speaker, and I take this opportunity to welcome them and wish them a very successful visit to the Senate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Faki, under 1 minute, and thereafter Senator Muma, under 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also join you in welcoming the Delegated Legislation Committee of the Kisumu County Assembly. This is a very important committee, and I think in many jurisdictions, it has not been appreciated. The work that this committee does is a lot, and tomorrow when we meet with our committee, we'll be able to appreciate what we do in this committee. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to welcome the team from Kisumu. Kisumu City is the cleanest city in the region, East and Central Africa. And Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that team has come to learn from our good team on delegated legislation. And we look forward to you going back and adding to the work of the County Assembly, improving your oversight and other functions that will contribute to Kisumu County being the greatest county in this republic. Thank you very much.
Senator Onyanka, under 1 minute.
Ndugu Spika, ningependa kusema asante sana kwa kunipa fursa nizungumze na kuwakaribisha ndugu zetu ambao wametoka kaunti ya Kisumu. Leo asubuhi tumekuwa na wao kule kwa kamati ya CPAC, na ningependa kuambia ndugu zangu na dada ambao wako hapa kuwa karibuni. Hili jumba ni jumba la heshima, na mkirudi Kisumu mwambie wananchi wetu kuwa tunashirikiana vilivyo. Kazi yetu ni kuhakikisha tumelinda ugatuzi na kuhakikisha kuwa tujaribu kurekebisha nchi yetu iwe nchi ambayo ni yenye heshima na ina masuala nyeti ya kutatua shida za watu maskini. Asante ndugu Spika.
Next order, clerk.
Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the Senate today, 19th of September 2023. This is a report of the Auditor General on the financial statements of Kiambu County Government Revenue Fund for the year that ended 30th June 2022.
Next order. The Chairperson, Standing Committee on Finance and Budget. Senator Roba, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for welcoming me back, as I extend also the same to the entire Senate. Welcome back. Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the Senate today, 19th of September 2023. Joint report of the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning of the National Assembly and the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget of the Senate on the approval hearing of Mr. Andrew Mwikite Musangi, nominee for appointment to the position of chairperson of the Central Bank of Kenya. I beg to lay.
Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Mr. Speaker, sir, that the Senate adopts the joint report of Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning of the National Assembly and the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget of the Senate on the vetting of Mr. Andrew Mwikite Musangi for the appointment of the chairperson of the Board of Directors of Central Bank of Kenya, laid on the table of the Senate today on Tuesday, the 19th of September 2023, and that pursuant to Section 11(2)(a) and of the Central Bank of Kenya Act and Section 8(1) of the Public Appointment Parliamentary Approval Act 2011, the Senate approves the appointment of Mr. Andrew Mwikite Musangi to the position of chairperson of the Board of Central Bank of Kenya.
Next order.
Order number 7, questions and statements.
The Honorable Senator Beth Siengo. That statement is dropped. Senator Alexander Mundigi.
Yes. Request for statement on capitation and disbursement on funds for Free Day Secondary Education FDSE program. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53.1 to check a statement from the Standing Committee on Education on capitation and disbursement of funds for Free Day Secondary Education FDSE program. In the statement, the committee should, 1, indicate the total funds disbursed by the government to secondary schools through the FDSE program up to the end of the second term in the current academic year versus the allocated capitation. State the plans by the government, if any, to review and adjust the FDSE funding from the current Kenya shillings 22 shillings 2.44 per student to assist schools in managing significant rise in cost for teaching materials and meals for boarding students, outlining the strategies that the government has implemented to enable schools board of management BOM to review the compensation of support staffs employed by the board on behalf of the government and indicate measures put in place, if any, to ensure timely remunerations of board employees by the schools administration. Senator Alexander Munyimondigi, M1.
The third statement is by Senator Tabitha Karanja. However, pursuant to written request, that statement is dropped. The next statement is by Senator Christo Lasige. What is a point of order, Senator Faki?
I rise pursuant to Standing Order number 37 of the Senate Standing Orders to seek leave of the Senate to adjourn to discuss a definite matter of urgent national importance, namely the security situation in Lamu County heightened by the recent attacks by suspected Al-Shabaab militants.
Now, honorable senators, the motion has attained the requested number of support, and therefore are we slated for 5:30 today for discussion. Thank you. Senator Christo Lasige, that statement is dropped. The fifth is nominated Senator George Mbugua. Kindly proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53.1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee of National Security, Defense and Foreign Relations on the preparedness of the Kenya government in mitigating the effects of the anticipated El Nino-induced climate extremes between August and December 2023. In the statement, the committee should, 1, highlight the cross-sectoral preparedness by the government in mitigating the adverse effects of the anticipated El Nino-induced climate extremes to avert human suffering and prevent environmental degradation. 2, explain the measures and policies, if any, established by the national and county governments on disaster intervention through capacity building for early warning and disaster preparedness, and how the same are being applied to mitigate climate-related disasters. And 3, state if there is substantial public awareness on the impending impact of the anticipated El Nino weather phenomena, particularly to the vulnerable population. And 4, ascertain whether the national and county governments have instituted cross-sectoral collaborative teams to manage the effects of the anticipated El Nino, drawing lessons from the past oversights and neglect as witnessed in the El Nino catastrophe of 1997-98. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Senator for Nairobi, Senator Edwin Sifuna. Just make the two statements at once. Yeah?
Most obliged, Speaker. Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on National Security, Defense and Foreign Relations regarding a morbid and most unfortunate claim that corpses were hired from morgues during the anti-tax demonstrations of June and July 2023. In the statement, the committee should ascertain the authenticity of the claims by the IG of Police that corpses were hired during the June and July demonstrations, and if so, state the number of bodies hired, the mortuaries involved, and the culpable individuals and organizations. Second statement, Mr. Speaker, is pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Health on the prevalent and unfair hiring and promotions of nurses at the Kenyatta National Hospital and hospitals run by the Nairobi City County Government. In the statement, the committee should, number one, explain why the KNH employs new nurses from outside on permanent and pensionable terms, through routinely issued internal advertisements while bypassing many of those already on contract at the same institution. Number two, investigate allegations that promotions to higher nursing cadres at the hospital do not follow the key elements of experience, institutional knowledge, and fair labor practices. Number three, cause the KNH management to provide a comprehensive breakdown of recent employments and promotions in the nursing cadres covering the last 2 years for both permanent and contract employees, with emphasis on relevant qualifications, experience, and equity in hiring. And lastly, explain the reasons for unfair or skewed promotion among nursing cadres in the Nairobi County hospitals, where there are allegations that some nurses who have worked for 10 years or more are only promoted up one scale instead of the 2 that is expected. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Next, Senator Tabitha Mutenda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Information, Communication and Technology regarding the state of digital skills literacy in Kenya. In the statement, the committee should, one, provide data and statistics on digital skills literacy among Kenyan public officers and the general population, clarifying whether there is a standardized assessment tool used to gauge digital skills proficiency among the Kenyan population. Two, report to the implementation of the Kenya National Digital Master Plan for the period 2022-2032, aimed at, among other things, equipping over 20 million Kenyans with digital skills. Indicate whether any efforts have been made by the government to incorporate technology effectively into the education curriculum in Kenya. And four, state the measures put in place to promote digital literacy to ensure all Kenyans access digital job opportunities, government services that are offered online, and are aware of the cyber threats, indicating any collaboration the government has with entities in the digital space. Thank you.
The Honorable Beatrice Ogola.
Honorable Speaker, this is a request for a statement on the loss of an AK-47 rifle in Dewa Police Station, Dewa Sub-County in Homa Bay County. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to the Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on National Security, Defense and Foreign Relations regarding the loss and subsequent recovery of an AK-47 rifle in Dewa Police Station. In the statement, Mr. Speaker, the committee should, one, explain the circumstances leading to the loss and eventual recovery of an AK-47 rifle at Dewa Police Station, outlining the precise chain of custody, including the issuing authority, the recipient, the intended purpose for which it was issued, and whether any other firearms were issued concurrently, Mr. Speaker, sir. Two, the committee should provide a comprehensive report regarding the duration of the missing rifle when it remained unaccounted for, stating whether any suspects were identified as having been involved in its disappearance. 3, Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee should elucidate the circumstances surrounding the recovery of the AK-47 rifle, including details on when and how it was located, the condition it was found in, and the method employed to recover it. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee should state the current assessment of safety and security within our community in light of this event. Senator Beatrice Ogola.
Next, Order Clerk.
Order number 8, procedural motion, reduction of publication period of specified bills.
The Majority Leader.
Madzaya. Wait, Sifuna. Sifuna. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the following motion, that pursuant on the reduction of publication period of specified bills, that, Mr. Speaker, pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order number 139, the Senate resolves to reduce the publication period of the following bills that were published on the 15th of September 2023 from 14 days to 4 days. That is 1, the Facilities Improvement Financing Bill, Senate Bill number 43 of 2023, and 2, the Primary Healthcare Bill, Senate Bills number 44 of 2023. Mr. Speaker, these are procedural motion requesting the House, seeking the indulgence, that we reduce the publication period of these particular bills because they are of an urgent nature. You do appreciate, Mr. Speaker, that health is a devolved function, and there has been a conversation around what county governments and what is their place in UHC. And county governments have requested, Mr. Speaker, I have seen, and I've just confirmed with the chair and members of the, what is it called, the health committee, that they've had extensive conversation about these bills. They're actually 4 in nature. 2 have begun in the Assembly, 2 are beginning in the Senate, so that without getting to the second quarter of the financial year in our county assemblies, our counties can streamline their operations with UHC, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, I find the reasons given as justified, both from the national and the county governments, and therefore I've requested that the House do agree that the Committee on Health considers this bill within that specified period. The beauty, Mr. Speaker, with this is that during the time that they'll be doing public participation, they will actually do this in Turkana, which is quite important because these are counties, some of the counties that actually need UHC, Mr. Speaker, some of the very affected parts of the country. And therefore, with those many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move and request the minority leader to second. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I do second.
Now, honorable senators, I proceed to propose the question that pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 139 of the Senate resolves to reduce the publication period of the following bills that were published on the 15th of September 2023 from 14 days to 4 days. 1, the Facilities Improvement Financing Bill, Senate Bills number 43 of 2023, and 2, the Primary Health Care Bill, Senate Bills number 44 of 2023. Now, honorable senators, you will note that on our standing orders, each of you will have 20 minutes to make their contribution on this matter. You may, however, wish to invoke Standing Order 111 and limit debate, but that, again, is up to you. This being a procedural motion, we may either limit debate or proceed straight to put the question. Very well. Now, honorable senators, I now proceed to put the question. To reduce the publication period of the following bills that are published on the 15th September 2023 from 14 days to 4 days. 1, the Facilities Improvement Financing Bill, Senate Bills number 43 of 2023, and 2, the Primary Health Care Bill, Senate Bills number 44 of 2023. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 9, the Equalization Fund Appropriation Bill, Senate Bills number 30 of 2023, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to authorize the issue of a sum of money out of the Equalization Fund and its application towards the service of the year ending 30th June 2024, to appropriate that sum for certain public basic services and for connected purposes. Order number 10, the Food and Feed Safety Control Coordination Bill, National Assembly Bills number 21 of 2023, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to provide for the coordination of the public institutions in the control of food and feed safety, to establish the office of the Food and Feed Safety Controller, to provide for the role of county governments in food and feed safety and for connected purposes. Order number 11, the Water Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bills number 33 of 2023, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Water Act 2016 to provide for public-private partnerships arrangements and for connected purposes. Order number 12, the Facilities Improvement Financing Bill, Senate Bills number 43 of 2023, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to provide for public health facility improvement financing and management and administration of the improvement financing and for connected purposes. Order number 13, the Primary Health Care Bill, Senate Bills number 44 of 2023, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to provide for a framework for delivery of and access to and management of primary health care and for connected purposes.
Next order. Senator Kamar, kindly approach the chair, please. Now, honorable senators, for the convenience of the House, we proceed to rearrange the sequence of today's order paper pursuant to Standing Order 45-2 and proceed straight away to prosecute order number 19. And thereafter, we will come back to the order as contained in today's order paper. Clerk, kindly proceed to call that particular order.
Order number 19, the Kenyan Sign Language Bill, Senate Bills number 9 of 2023, second reading.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to move the Kenyan Sign Language Bill 2023, Senate Bills number 9 of 2023. Mr. Speaker, even before I move, I would like to inform the House that this week is the International Week for the Deaf, and so it is a very appropriate time for us to move this bill. I want to send a warm message of congratulations to our Kenyans who are of this group that are deaf. And more than that, I want to remember in a special way the sign language technical teams, both in the media, who talk to Kenyans on behalf of, who talk to Kenyans who cannot communicate verbally. I want to also congratulate those who have chosen to be teachers, special teachers for the deaf children. Mr. Speaker, only recently we went as a Committee of Education to special education schools, and we went to the School for the Deaf in Uasin Gishu County. And Mr. Speaker, in this week, I know they're celebrating this week all over the country, but I want to send greetings to these people because the teachers who have chosen to be special education teachers are very special people in this country. They have the patience, they have the courage, and they have the intelligence to communicate what most of us cannot communicate. So with those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I now beg to move the bill. Mr. Speaker, the Kenyan Sign Language Bill 2023 aims to create a comprehensive legal framework for the use of sign language to ensure that deaf learners are given the same opportunities as all other learners in the education system to be fully effective and productive members of society. This is extremely important because of the right of the child, right to education, which is a basic right in the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, before setting out the specific provisions of the bill, it befits us to understand the motivation behind the legislative proposal. The linguistic landscape can be challenging for the population who may be deaf or hard of hearing, as traditional spoken languages may not be accessible to them, thus creating barriers to education, employment, and participation in public life. Mr. Speaker, in other jurisdictions such as Australia, it is now increasingly recognized that signing deaf people constitute a group like any other non-English speaking language group. This shows that meaningful legal recognition of national sign language leads to better enjoyment of human rights. Mr. Speaker, it's also worth noting that in our own constitution, we have 3 languages. We have English, recognized, we have Kiswahili recognized, and the sign language recognized. The Kenyan Sign Language Bill, Mr. Speaker, carries significant consequences for the inclusion and accessibility of deaf individuals in the Kenyan society. It seeks to dismantle barriers that have hindered the full participation of the deaf community in various spheres of life, including judicial proceedings, education, and employment. So in a way, this is a group that are felt discriminated against, although there are provisions in the Constitution that gives them the right. Mr. Speaker, the bill therefore draws its strength from the Constitution, particularly Article 10(2), which designates human dignity, equity, social justice, inclusivity, equality, human rights, non-discrimination, and the protection of the marginalized as national values and principles of governance. Furthermore, Article 7(3)(b) of the Constitution emphasizes the promotion of indigenous languages as the Kenyan Sign Language, Braille, and other communication formats accessible to persons with disabilities. Similarly, Article 54(1)(d) stipulates that a person with any disability is entitled to use sign language, Braille, or other appropriate means of communication. The Constitution, therefore, envisions that public institutions shall establish facilities to ensure the inclusion of deaf persons and those who are hard of hearing in their processes. Mr. Speaker, sir, Clause 4 of the bill provides formal recognition to the use of Kenyan Sign Language by the deaf or those of hard hearing, emphasizing its importance in communication. Mr. Speaker, Clause 5 of the bill outlines the duties of both the national and the county levels of government regarding the sign language development. Mr. Speaker, this includes consulting with the deaf community on matters relating to its development, use, and promotion, using sign language in government services and public information, providing free interpretation in Kenyan Sign Language to those who rely on it for accessing statutory entitlements or services, and ensuring information relating to public services is accessible through the Kenyan Sign Language. On the other hand, Clause 6 ensures that a person whose first or preferred language is the Kenyan Sign Language is entitled to use Kenyan Sign Language in legal proceedings. Judicial officers are therefore required to ensure that competent and recognized interpreters are available during such proceedings. And this is extremely important, Mr. Speaker, because somebody who is deaf or hard of hearing in this country, when they go to court, they go there at the mercy of whoever is available in the judicial system. This bill is going to make it compulsory and to make it mandatory that these people are facilitated properly. In fact, there are cases where somebody, a parent or a guardian, takes such an individual and changes the meaning of what they would like to pass, even in court. So it is very important that they are able to be independent at the stage when they require to use this language to communicate. Mr. Speaker, the bill obligates the Cabinet Secretary for Education to provide educational support for deaf learners. This support includes teaching methods that cater for their understanding of curricula, assistance in acquiring competence in the use of English and Kiswahili languages, teaching Kenyan Sign Language in the sign form, setting aside funds for educational materials, offering courses on Kenyan Sign Language and interpretation in teacher training institutions, providing placement for teachers of the deaf or hard of hearing children, and ensuring accessible reading materials in English, Kiswahili, and Kiswahili for the deaf community. Mr. Speaker, it is good to note that when we had public participation for this bill, we were very much surprised by parents who came in and said, the deaf children in particular have had a lot of conflict as far as communication is concerned. Because at home, the families have adopted a way of communicating with them, which is just known to the family. Then when they go and meet with other children, the other children sign also differently. Then beyond that, when they go to, if they don't have a unified way, they actually hardly communicate with everybody. And a deaf child, Mr. Speaker, is a very unique child, because this is a child who is well in all ways, except they cannot communicate. So it is extremely important, and that is why it's very important in this bill that the Cabinet Secretary of Education considers these very special children in a way that they be provided for at a very early stage. In fact, somewhere in the bill, we have also mentioned that for these children to be in school under the integrated system, because internationally the issue of integration is coming up, that special children do not really have to be alone. So how do we ensure that they are not alone? There is a proposal that we have put in this bill that we would actually like KICD to have a curriculum that can be enjoyed by all our children. Mr. Speaker, children at the age of 6 can learn anything. They can learn 10 languages. They can talk in Kiluya, talk in Kikuyu, talk in Kalenjin, talk in Kiswahili, talk in English at the same time, and communicate to different people differently. Sign language is one of those languages we want to introduce. So this bill is trying to introduce that because it will be fun for the children, but more, it will enable us to integrate these children. So the Cabinet Secretary has a lot of obligation here to get materials that can be taught, and not only taught in the school, but also in the training institutions. Because what we need is teachers who can communicate. If a child who is deaf or hard of hearing goes to a school, and we find that there are a lot who go to school currently, who go to any nearby school, because this is a special child whom the parents have not even decided where they would take them to. You find that they go to regular schools with the other kids, but when they go to school, they cannot communicate with anybody. So we are also proposing in the bill that actually these materials should be spread to other schools. We don't want it even to be a club, but we want all the children to learn it. But I'll be mentioning that again a bit later. Mr. Speaker, the bill mandates the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development to develop, review, and approve appropriate programs, curricula, and curriculum support materials for learners who are deaf or hard hearing. Mr. Speaker, additionally, the bill requires the Cabinet Secretary, in consultation with relevant bodies, to develop a national system of standards, accreditation, and procedures for the Kenyan Sign Language interpretation. This is done with input from members of the Deaf Society. This should be done with input from members of the Deaf Society, deaf community. This also empowers the Cabinet, this bill also empowers the Cabinet Secretary in consultation with the Kenyan National Accreditation Agency and members of the deaf community to regulate the provision of Kenya Sign Language interpretation. Mr. Speaker, it is very important that this is regulated. We have seen a mushrooming of people who are saying we are qualified interpreters. And since those of us who don't know whether the interpretation is correct or not, we just assume you hire somebody when you have a workshop, because currently we are saying in workshops and meetings and conferences, you should have interpreters. We have been hiring interpreters without necessarily knowing whether the signing that they are doing is of the right quality or the right standard. So it is very important that that is also regulated. So this includes establishing procedures and criteria for the registration of interpreters and maintaining a register of the Kenyan Sign Language interpreters. This is very important, Mr. Speaker, so that whenever we have conferences, whether it is this Senate or KEWOSA or any other group, and we need an interpreter, we just go to the, we just check the website of the Kenya Sign Language interpreters and pick whoever you want from there. That way, we'll have standardized and we will know who can do the work. Mr. Speaker, ideally, the bill also stipulates that individuals wishing to provide Kenya Sign Language interpretation services must apply for registration with the Ministry of Education. This is very important. Just the way we say you must register as a teacher with a TSC, we need a body within the Ministry of Education that registers interpreters so that we don't have everybody or any Tom, Dick, and Harry coming in to say, I am an interpreter. There is a designated, there should be a designated officer, therefore, from the Ministry of Education appointed as the registrar of Kenya Sign Language interpreters, responsible for maintaining the register of the registered interpreters in an accessible manner so that anybody who requires the services of interpreters can also access them easily. Mr. Speaker, the bill permits individuals to inspect the register upon payment of a prescribed fee, ensuring transparency and accountability. This also emphasizes the importance of, the bill also emphasizes the importance of a code of conduct for sign language interpreters and the promotion of basic Kenyan language among government employees at the national and county level. This promotion, as I had mentioned earlier, means we all need to start learning how to utilize the language. The Speaker, a parent came to us during the public hearing of this bill, and we were surprised that when she discovered her child was deaf, she actually decided to train the whole family. And they had a private person coming in to talk to them, to sign, so that they were able to communicate with this child. This, I think, as we are saying, every child has a right to education in the form in which they can enjoy the education. It is very important to note that it goes beyond that child. It touches everybody else around that child. And so Kenya Sign Language should just be one of our third languages, and we should not learn how to use it so that we can communicate with these very special Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Kenyan Sign Language Bill emphasizes inclusivity, equality, and the protection of the rights of a minority population called the deaf in this country. In a diverse society like Kenya, where numerous languages are spoken, it is essential to ensure that no one is left behind due to communication barriers. The bill mandates the provision of the sign language interpreters in various public services, making information and services more accessible to this group. Access to sign language can improve social inclusion and participation in various aspects of society, such as community events, public meetings, and cultural activities. Hence, the need to make this language as prominent as the other languages. Mr. Speaker, by mandating the use of Kenya Sign Language in judicial proceedings, as I said earlier, the bill ensures that deaf individuals have equal access to justice. Sign language legislation can help protect the rights of the deaf community and ensure that they are not discriminated against. This is a fundamental right that should not be denied based on one's hearing ability. And especially as we continue to emphasize in this bill, the use of sign language in the judicial proceedings. There are people who have even lost land, Mr. Speaker, because they did not know the transaction was going on as communications were happening, even when they were sitting next to the persons. So it is very important that we provide we provide a way of communication for them, and hence the importance of the sign language and the sign language bill. Honorable Speaker, this bill places a strong emphasis on education support for the deaf learners. The bill can have provisions related to education, ensuring that deaf students have access to quality education that includes sign language as a medium of instruction. This can empower deaf individuals with the skills and knowledge they need for personal and professional development. Mr. Speaker, although the integrated education system is dominant in Kenya, local schools that accommodate learners with disabilities encounter great challenges in creating an inclusive setting. Promoting the use of sign language and providing support for deaf individuals in education and employment, such legislation can enhance their access to job opportunities and reduce discrimination in the workplace. Mr. Speaker, when we went to the school for the deaf in Eldoret, we saw the challenges that the teachers encounter. Basically, because the teaching materials that are given to these schools are exactly the same as the teaching materials that are given to other schools. We also discovered that there is no provision on the ratio of the learners against the teachers. Because for a special child, the ratio has to be different because of the attention that these children require. And we discovered that there are still many challenges which this bill is trying to cure. Mr. Speaker, this legislation therefore seeks to acknowledge the status of the Kenyan Sign Language as a legitimate and distinct language in the Constitution. This recognition is essential in preserving linguistic diversity and cultural heritage. Nonetheless, the use of sign language as a teaching instrument is not fully integrated in the Kenyan education system, with over half the schools not having sign language curriculum. And this challenge, Mr. Speaker, is even touching on the institutions, the training institutions of our teachers. Mr. Speaker, because of the fact that teachers encounter special children as teachers in particular, because you never know when a deaf child is brought, you never know when a child with epilepsy is brought to your class, you never know those. It is very important that as we talk of the curriculum for learners, we also talk of the curriculum of the training institutions, so that every teacher can handle this kind of children. Deaf children are very easy to handle because they can see, they understand everything around the environment by seeing, but they need to communicate. So we are also proposing that in the teacher training institutions, a course on sign language should be undertaken. Just the way we say your second language is Kiswahili, take a third language called sign language as a teacher, so that every teacher can communicate. That way also in society, we will have a critical number of people in society that can actually communicate on our behalf if there is a challenge like that. And we should be able to, and they should be able to help. So apart from the teachers that we have in special schools, Mr. Speaker, I mean special training, the KISE, Kenya Institution of Special Schools, Special Education, we also need in the normal, ordinary training TTCs, the teacher training colleges, to include an area, a course that will enable every teacher to be able to communicate. That will not be too much for the teacher. It's a skill that they can learn within the same period when they're learning other things, and it will be very useful. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, this country has signed and ratified international agreements and conventions that promote the rights and inclusion of people with disabilities. Enacting sign language legislation can demonstrate a commitment to meeting these international obligations. It also includes provisions for raising awareness about the importance of sign language and deaf culture among the general public and relevant institutions. Mr. Speaker, I wish to sincerely thank the members of the Committee of Education and my co-sponsor, Senator Crystal, who will be contributing later when she comes, for their insightful contributions during the consideration of the bill, and the stakeholders at large, because we had a very vibrant public participation. I would also like to recognize in a very special way the senator who worked with me in the last Senate, Senator Musruve, who was really part and parcel of this bill, because we started the bill with her, and she did a lot of contribution at the beginning, because it's one bill that was picked in this Senate. I want to recognize her in a very, very special way. Senator Musruve did a very good job on this bill. Mr. Speaker, I thank you, and I would like to request Senator Halwale to second.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to congratulate my sister, Professor Margaret Kana, for giving me this opportunity to second this very important bill. Mr. Speaker, this is a very important matter, and it's not surprising that a medical expert is the one seconding it, because sometimes the House, it would help if you assist of the seriousness of a bill based on actual humanly experience. Mr. Speaker, this is not a light matter. Worldwide, it is estimated that over 1.5 billion people are affected with some degree of loss of hearing. And that worldwide, we actually have 70 million people who are afflicted with deafness. And the bad news is, of these 70 million people in the world, 80% of them are from the developing countries, which means this is a problem in Africa, and by extension, therefore, in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, so that it is not lost to us, the problem of hearing loss not only affects the individual, but it also affects the family of that individual. And Mr. Speaker, it affects the friends of that individual, and what's more, it affects the economy. These people are not able to make their contribution in creation of the commonwealth, of the family, the commonwealth of the community, the commonwealth of a nation. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, as I request members that we all stand behind Senator Sige and Senator Professor Margaret Kamal in quickly passing this bill, I would like to draw their attention on really what causes loss of hearing. The commonest cause, Mr. Speaker, is the natural aging process. As people age, so does loss of hearing become more and more evident. Then we have the contribution from accidents. It can be a mass accident, you are involved in a road traffic accident, or a direct hit on the hearing organ or hearing organs. Mr. Speaker, something which really lost to many Kenyans and which is very important is deafness as a result of noise pollution. And noise pollution is so rampant that it comes from some very bad places and some very good places. We all would be happy to condemn the music, loud music in the estates, the loud music in disco matangas that takes place in villages because they are bad. But we are also lost, honorable members, to the fact that churches are causing serious noise pollution. Some of the churches, and I don't wish to name any, they will go on playing their drums and shouting and preaching late into the night. And Mr. Speaker, this actually causes pollution. And with that pollution, slowly by slowly, people lose their hearing capacity. Is it lost on you, members, that some of the very loud preachers, and I know my own brother Bishop is looking at me with very keen eyes. I'm speaking technically, not emotionally. It should not be lost on us that if you listen to a preacher who preaches most of the time, they tend to speak louder because they think the people that they are talking to are not hearing them, so they raise their voices. It's because their hearing capacity has by itself gone down. Mr. Speaker, without the proper intervention, we have diseases that affect the ear, the nose, the throat, and these diseases actually lead to loss of decrease in hearing. What is more scary is that 60% of the young people, 18 years and below, who therefore this bill is really attempting to uplift, they get deaf because intervention was not met at the proper time. And the proper time is simple, Mr. Speaker, to encourage our women when they are pregnant to attend child maternal clinics.
Tabone, would you wish to be informed by Senator Kavindu?
Certainly, the gracious lady may inform me.
Kindly proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to inform Senator Halwale that I'm a preacher and I don't preach so loudly, I preach moderately. So when he's saying that preachers preach loudly because they lose their hearing, that is not true. I'm a preacher and I know that. So point of correction, and can you withdraw that because I'm a preacher? And I apologize to preachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Bone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr.
Senator
Speaker,
Bone,
I'm guided.
Kindly, Senator Bone, I do understand that you're a medical doctor. And therefore, your statement, is it based on your medical experience that the more the preachers speak in a loud manner, it therefore means that their own hearing has diminished? Is it medically proven? Are you saying that in a capacity as a medical doctor, or it's just a statement that is not based on any scientific facts? Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to apologize to my sister if in any way you thought my statement was an affront to preachers. Not in any way. But if you ask doctors, they will tell you, Mr. Speaker, sir, that hearing is a manifestation of successful communication. And this is why the ones who are deaf We are making a bill today to help them to communicate with people. When you are speaking, the reason why in a public rally where you don't have a hearing aid, you raise your voice, it is because, Mr. Speaker, medically, the intellect of the mind is tuned to inform you that even as you speak, those people you're speaking to must hear you. And as you strain yourself over and over, just like you are shouting for those people 100 meters away to hear you, and you are making noise, you are also hearing yourself. Your voice is polluting your own ears. Mr. Speaker, having apologized, I'll not go further. Allow me to conclude my contribution. I was saying that these children whose mothers do not attend clinics, whose mothers do not take them to the clinic during their early age, it is called the neonatal period, are more likely to lose their hearing sense. And it affects, Mr. Speaker, 60% of the population below 18 years. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, allow me to conclude by urging the public to know that there are interventions that we can make so as to reduce the people either with deafness or people with diminished hearing capacity. As I've said before, if you give good maternal care to our pregnant women, if you give good neonatal care to newly born children, is a huge contribution that you make. And because the majority of the people on social media, the majority of the people who have access to modern telephony, the majority of the people who have a good education are actually the minority of the community that is called the nation, these matters may look light. Mr. Speaker, we also would like to encourage people that you should have positive methods of communicating with children. Because some of the children with diminished hearing loss, Mr. Speaker, if you don't talk to them positively, especially if you are a teacher, you might think that this child is foolish. Positive communication means you talk to these children when you have, Mr. Speaker, eye contact. And members of the public ought to know that as we create this law, we have got hearing aids that actually make a difference. This House knows the common one that you see as loops that are looped into the child's ear or the patient's ear. They help. We also have, where families can afford care, we have what we call cochlear implants, which they can use. And then finally, the most important, and I'm happy it is captured in this bill, the government, both national and county, must make their own contribution in increasing the number of interpreters. In fact, Mr. Speaker, if you go to some of our rallies, if you watch some of the football matches, if you watch some of the crusades, the people who normally do interpretations are volunteers. They know in their own minds that in that crowd, in that audience, we have people who are not hearing. So they make their own contribution. So it would help, Mr. Speaker, that we all contribute towards increasing the number of interpreters. With those many remarks, I wish to second the bill as moved. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Senators. I now proceed to propose the question that the Kenyan Sign Language Bill, Senate Bills number 9 of 2023, be now read a second time. You may now proceed to make your contributions. Senator Wambua.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to make a contribution to this bill. And even as I do that, Mr. Speaker, I want to join you and the leadership of the Senate to welcome back our colleagues from recess, and hope that this session, Mr. Speaker, shall be fruitful for the benefit of the people that we represent in this House. Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity, first of all, to really thank and congratulate Senator Professor Margaret Kamar and Senator Chris Olasige for coming up with such a wonderful bill. The Kenyan Sign Language Bill, Bill number 2023. The Speaker, I want to go straight to the provisions of the bill and declare that I fully support this bill. The Speaker, when you look at the objects of this bill, as captured in clause 3, from A to I, the objects of this bill can be summed up as an attempt to help the deaf in society to realize their full potential, both in school and in society. That the promoters of this bill have applied their minds to constitutional provisions on the right to develop the Kenyan Sign Language and reduced that into a bill that then, if it is passed, and I know it will be, then it will give effect to the stated constitutional provisions. The Speaker, the bill in clause 4 speaks to a targeted public participation. Mr. Speaker and honorable colleagues, if there is one thing that the Constitution of Kenya 2010 blessed this nation with, is a provision to ensure that any legislation in any house, in any assembly, be it the National Assembly, the county assemblies, or the Senate, any legislation before it becomes an act of parliament, before it becomes law, it has to pass through public participation, so that the public can have a say on how they are being governed and how the laws that govern them are being made. For the most part, Mr. Speaker, public participation in a lot of instances when we are making laws has more or less become a PR exercise. It has become just an act of ticking the boxes and ensuring that we have lived to the expectations of the Constitution and the law. But in this bill, the Speaker, the promoters are pushing for targeted public participation by the users and consumers of the Kenyan Sign Language, so that they are brought on board, that their views, their needs, and their aspirations are catered for when it comes to legislation. The Speaker, clause 6 recognizes that the Kenyan Sign Language is actually a first language to a section of our society. And that it is also a first language by choice to a section of our society. And in so doing, the Speaker, then it pushes for the use of sign language in legal proceedings, in our courts, in our tribunals. And the Speaker, that's a big step and a step in the right direction. And I want to take this opportunity as Speaker, even as we push for that to happen in legal proceedings, and congratulate our mainstream media houses. Over a period of 5, 6, maybe 7 years, media houses have invested in sign language for especially their news bulletins. I would encourage them to take a bold step and make sign language part of their everyday, every minute, every hour communication with the public. So that even in broadcasts that are not news bulletins, then we have interpreters there who use a sign language. The Speaker, I like the provisions of Clause 7 of the bill, where the Cabinet Secretary is obligated to ensure that deaf learners are taught in a manner which they are able to understand, that the CS should ensure teachers of deaf children acquire sufficient competence in the use of English and Kiswahili language, and ensure development of supportive instructional materials for the education of deaf learners. Mr. Speaker, the provisions of that clause have very far-reaching implications on the Cabinet Secretary responsible for education. One, this clause, by the nature of the way it has been drafted, obligates the CS to ensure the training and the recruitment of additional special teachers, especially teachers for deaf children. That clause, Mr. Speaker, ensures that the Kenya Institute of Special Education, and I will cross-reference that to the provisions of Clause 18. You know, Mr. Speaker, for the longest time, the Kenya Institute of Special Education, which is based in Nairobi, has virtually been the only institution in this country that is training special teachers for all the schools in the country. So the competition for enrollment at KISE all the time has overwhelmed the capacity of the institution to absorb as many teachers as are necessary to ensure that the provisions of Clause 7 of this bill are met. So, Mr. Speaker, so that we don't pay lip service to a bill as important as this, then mechanisms must be put in place, and I'm very sure my teacher, Professor Kamar, will follow through on this one, to ensure then we begin to devolve KISE, that the Kenya Institute of Special Education cannot just be based in Nairobi. There will be a need to devolve that institution so that in Kakamega, we have a Kenya Institute of Special Education in the same way that we have Kenya medical training colleges all over the country, even at the constituency level. So, Mr. Speaker, we we open opportunities for teachers to be trained for special education all over the country. That way then the provisions of Clause 7 will begin to make sense. Mr. Speaker, the other obligation on the Cabinet Secretary is that because there is need then for him or her to ensure that there is development of sufficient supportive instructional materials, then my teacher, Professor Kamar, then we must also find a way of making it an obligation on the Minister for Education when they are doing capitation for schools, to ensure then that they factor the need to purchase special instructional materials to cater for the needs of children with difficulties in hearing. The Speaker, I fully support this bill, and as I conclude, the Speaker, the provisions of Clause 18, which I had made reference to. In fact, what the promoters of this bill are saying is that as much as is practically possible, then everybody who goes to school, they need to be trained in the Kenyan Sign Language. That is aspirational, but it's a good step. It's a place to begin. So that, in fact, going into the future, then the Kenyan Sign Language, because it is called Kenyan, which means it is uniquely Kenyan, then the Kenyan Sign Language becomes the third national or official language in this country. So, Mr. Speaker, then that way, we don't need special interpreters of messaging on radio, on TV, in public rallies. That if I go to Kakamega to address a rally, I can very easily just tap any person that has gone to a school and tell them, come here and translate for the people, because everybody then will have attained sufficient competencies for Kenyan Sign Language. If this Kenyan Sign Language, then it's our language as speaker, and I believe it is, then we must show it by example. We must begin to teach it in schools. It must begin to become an examinable subject in our schools. The Speaker, with those many remarks, I support the bill.
Senator Chirenge. Maybe before, Senator, you proceed,
okay.
Allow me to make this communication. I would like to acknowledge the presence in the Speaker's Gallery this afternoon, a visiting delegation from the County Assembly of Kajiado. The delegation comprises of 3 officers from the Office of the Speaker who are on a benchmarking visit with their counterparts in the Senate. Now, honorable senators, on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, I extend a warm welcome and I wish them a fruitful visit. I will allow Senator Tobiko under 1 minute to say a word of welcome.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, let me thank you for this opportunity. Let me take the chance to welcome the delegation from the Kajiado County Assembly to the Senate of the Republic of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, this team is on a, working mission and learning mission at the Senate. I'm sure their time here will be well spent. It will be of value to the Assembly of Kajiado and to the great people of the County of Kajiado. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Chirenge, kindly proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. And from the onset, I want also to join you to welcome a number of guests. I've seen today the senators, a lot of guests, from students to visiting delegations. Mr. Speaker, I want from the onset to congratulate Senator Professor Margaret Kamar, Deputy Speaker Emeritus, for bringing this bill, the Kenya Sign Language Bill 2023. Mr. Speaker, I was asking myself, is it possible to have what we call the special needs bill, so that we put everybody, the deaf, the blind, the mute, so that we don't need to do per legislation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill has come at a good time. I think we are having conversation and being cognizant of our people with special needs in our society. I want just to join my colleagues in supporting this bill and saying this is timely. Mr. Speaker, the issue of sign language or the deaf, Mr. Speaker, is something that the Constitution gave an attention. Article 210, not Article 210, the Constitution 2010, Mr. Speaker, as enumerated as languages of the Republic of Kenya, should include English, Kiswahili, and also the sign language. So I think we are rightfully in place. I think this is just elaboration of, Mr. Speaker, of recognition of this special group of individuals within our communities and within our nation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Article 44, and Article 54 on PWDs, Mr. Speaker, recognizes that the government has a role. And I want to request Senator Professor Margaret Kamar that we need audits as per Article 54.5, where it says the state shall ensure the progressive implementation of the principle that at least 5% of the members of the public in elective and appointive bodies are persons with disabilities. So, Speaker, I think it is the right time as a Senate, and I don't know how we will initiate that, where we have progressive reports, because we are passing a lot of legislation. We are requesting, Mr. Speaker, compliance, Mr. Speaker. We are requesting a lot of attention, but there is no one, Mr. Speaker, that can tell us today in county governments in Kenya, this is the number of PWDs that have been elected or appointed across the country. I think for us in the Senate and Parliament, these are issues that we are grappling with, even the county assemblies. But on the appointive aspect, because Mr. Speaker, appointive is easy. You know, we can argue with you about elective, because if you're having 6 constituencies in Nandi, which one should belong to PWDs? Do you force people to elect PWDs to achieve the threshold? But the easiest way, Mr. Speaker, is to only engage on the counties. Let us do an audit. We've complied at national and county governments, Mr. Speaker. And I think that is, I've seen Senator Kamara has been a great champion of PWDs, or Kenyans who live differently, ably. So, Speaker, I want to confirm to the House that I'm not one of the PWDs, Mr. Speaker. So anyone who is watching or seeing me should not imagine I'm just a temporary PWD, and I hope your office should facilitate my temporary status until I fully recover, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and therefore Article 54 this is the life that is being breathed into Article 54, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, even I want to bring another point. I know my colleagues have talked about devolving the training of people with special needs. I'm proposing, Mr. Speaker, the national government should give tax-free to all assisting devices, so that our people, Mr. Speaker, the hearing aid, the seeing, any process, even the things that are being used by deaf schools in this country, Mr. Speaker, they should be given tax-free. I know there is situation of Inua, sorry, I almost say Inua Mama. Mr. Speaker, Inua Jamii. There was, before those days, there was what we call Inua Mama, but we didn't know where they were ignoring Mama too. But, Mr. Speaker, it was about the Inua Jamii and their registering. Mr. Speaker, the PWDs and the people above 70, I think that's what the Ministry of Interior or the Ministry concerned is doing. So the question should be, when we are doing this registration, there are people, Mr. Speaker, who are also severely impaired, or PWDs that are severely impaired, Mr. Speaker. But when we are registering now, no one is very keen to capture them, these people living that. And you see, Mr. Speaker, where I come from, The PWDs in my county, for example, Nandi, have complained. And counties are not taking them seriously. For example, in my county, what they do yearly, and you know this is budgeted, they call them to Kapsabet showground. They give them soda, mkate, or a loaf of bread, blankets, and mattresses, and that is the end. That is how low some of the counties think about PWDs. And unfortunately, my county is leading on having a low view of how our PWDs should be treated in this republic, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, I want to laud Senator Kamara. I think this is the right we're having this conversation. And therefore, on the tax-free, Mr. Speaker, I was told the cochlear implant that my brother, Senator Boni Khalwale, was talking about, we need to give them tax-free, the devices, hearing aid, Mr. Speaker, reading glasses, any other form, the walking sticks, I know, Mr. Speaker, there are many organizations who are doing it as part of charity, but we must ensure that there is tax-free to any assistive devices to most of our young men and women, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, even public places, access, we must agree, Mr. Speaker, and also the funding of these schools. I know ministry is doing affirmative action. Where I come from, Mr. Speaker, in Kapsabet town, near Namgo, it is a school for the deaf, and it continues, Mr. Speaker. We must push and ensure that they have the proper support from the government in terms of facilities and resource mobilization, Mr. Speaker. You know the problem, Mr. Speaker, we have left the less fortunate in this society to the mercy of charity organizations, where we imagine the people who are PWDs, the attention they deserve is from the NGOs, Mr. Speaker. And you can see these NGOs that fund most of these organizations also come at a strings attached, Mr. Speaker. So we must be honest, and that is why if you listen to most of stories of defilement, rape cases, abuse of children by NGO individuals, and there are cases that have been adjudicated and determined by the court of law, Mr. Speaker, is majorly these homes were the less fortunate in society. So as a country, I think we need to change attitude. We should not allow our PWDs, including the deaf, to be at the mercy of charity organizations or people who just feel sympathy or people who just want to feel sympathy for them, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the fourth point that I wanted to make, this bill, the objects has been well captured. Of course, the issue of tax-free, and then, Mr. Speaker, the issue of stigma. You know, Mr. Speaker, as my colleague have put it across, sometimes you get such challenges as through an accident or, as my brother Senator Kalwale said, advanced age, and also others are born with. And I think, Mr. Speaker, to ensure we don't have stigma, I have seen the bill has captured that we look a way of integrating the whole family. Senator Kamara has given us an highlight where during the public participation, the parent decided to train everybody, Mr. Speaker. We should see this as reintegration of the entire family, be part of the entire process to ensure we remove stigma in the country and allow that people who are deaf can live a normal life like all of us, can drive, can, with the assistive devices and the necessary support, Mr. Speaker, it will be easy to proceed, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of course, clause 6, that one has been discussed. And then I wanted to just add a comment on the issue of process of recognition. Mr. Speaker, we must ensure that I heard about the interpreter, so I don't know, whenever nowadays, Mr. Speaker, when you watch news, when we are in our meetings, you see an interpreter. Now that we are doing the Presidential Working Party of Education and we are doing CPC implementation, curriculum-based competence-based curriculum, CBC, Mr. Speaker, I think it is a high time that we have USA Kenya Institute of Special Education. We must come up with a uniform syllabus. Even Kenya National Examination, Mr. Speaker, can be the examining body so that we have interpreters that are particular qualification. And then we have quality and standards in place that Senator Professor Margaret Kamar has captured. And of course, Senator Kamar, being a former Minister of Higher Education and Minister of Education before, in a earlier life, it is important that we come and ensure, as the CBC is being rolled out, we ensure such new areas, frontiers in syllabus, especially on interpreters, Mr. Speaker, have an opportunity in place. And I think it is also a challenge to all of us, Mr. Speaker. Let us learn sign language as part of life skills, just like first aid, because you never know where you will be. And Mr. Speaker, we want in future to even have senators, members of parliament, governors, even president, who are either people who are differently blessed, Mr. Speaker. And I know we have a number of colleagues, the co-sponsor, Senator Crystal Lasike, Senator Mbugua Mungai, who is the vice chair of the Labour Committee. So, Speaker, it means that you can still be a leader in this country despite that. Mr. Speaker, on recognition by the judiciary, I don't know, because they said the judicial officer shall make a determination. So if we have a structured process of approval of interpreters, Mr. Speaker, it will be even easy, like some of us, when you appear to court, the magistrate, the judge can easily take your number of admission or to the bar and be able to check. So I think in regulation, the senator can still include so that it becomes easy. You know, Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, most of the things we like shortcuts. So if you don't have a proper process, it will be hard. So, Speaker, on clause number 7, I think reintegration on children also that they grow. And also, you know, there are children who are deaf, Mr. Speaker, they should be given the opportunity to reintegrate and be part of the learning process. Mr. Speaker, even as the Teacher Service Commission recruits the hiring of new teachers to fill in the cab across the country, Mr. Speaker, we want to call upon that they should also ensure at least they hire a number of interpreters in our schools so that our children, Mr. Speaker, get opportunity in various schools. I pray one day, Mr. Speaker, you walk to a classroom like here in Starehe Boys Center or Buruburu Girls, and you get a deaf student sitting in classroom because there is an interpreter that has been hired by TSC, Mr. Speaker. Over the weekend, Mr. Speaker, I was in Kericho, Ainamo constituency, where we were burying the first national chairman, Stanley Mutahi. And teachers were raising a lot of issues, Mr. Speaker. And I think one of the issues that should be captured is to look at special needs teachers are being part where they had that discussion, Mr. Speaker, in Kericho County on Saturday. And the issue of delocalization, Mr. Speaker, is still rearing its ugly head. Mr. Speaker, as government, as the ruling party, we came with a platform of abolishment of delocalization. But it's very sad that some individuals in TSC here in Nairobi still find it wise to still delocalize teachers, Mr. Speaker. You delocalize a teacher from Bomet or Nandi all the way to your county, Kilifi. They are at 58 years old. They have hypertension, Mr. Speaker, or diabetic. They are old, Mr. Speaker. They are looking at the retirement. I think the best that we can do as a country, let us give them the freedom of choice. Because even in Northern Kenya, Mr. Speaker, because of insecurity, I've seen teachers, Mr. Speaker, demonstrating at TSC headquarters. I think from Northern Kenya, Mr. Speaker, there must be affirmative action on how they can get the native teachers in that region to avoid our sons and daughters, Mr. Speaker, the risk of insecurity in the country. And I think Senator Professor Kithure Kindiki should be seized of the matter, Mr. Speaker. I think as a country, I'm not saying we should be cowards and run away from areas like Northern and Lamu, but as the government pushes to ensure these terrorists are being fought, Mr. Speaker, because terrorists are cowards. They don't agree to face anybody. What they do is they set bombs and IEDs and just run away. But they do. So to Mr. Speaker, I've gotten a lot of complaints and appeal from these teachers who are in Northern Kenya. I know the children of Northern Kenya, Mr. Speaker, deserve to be taught. They deserve quality and affordable education. But as a country, we must be realistic to the facts. I think the long-term solution is trying and having affirmative action in northern Kenya to have the natives and from that region being part of the hiring by Teacher Service Commission so that, Mr. Speaker, we can be able to resolve. So I want to confirm to the teachers that we were in Kericho over the weekend that on the aspect of delocalization, we shall not relent. Our position is crystal clear. Delocalization was abolished and it should be abolished. Let teachers work where they find it comfortable. It is not a business of government to create crises in families and encourage Kiptindinyas of this world, Mr. Speaker, to infiltrate into the family unit, which is the basic of society of this country, Mr. Speaker. And even, Mr. Speaker, as we discussed about education, you saw the Supreme Court ruling on LGBTQ, Mr. Speaker. And I saw a delegation from Uganda, which you have hosted ably, is we want to thank President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, and we wish him long life. And we are happy that he cannot be intimidated or blackmailed by people who want to give aid to Uganda with strings that they should approve issues of lesbianism and gayism. He is the only man who has stood against such intimidation, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say that the Supreme Court, Mr. Speaker, the Constitution is very clear. Family is a basic, as has been defined, Mr. Speaker, family is a man and a wife, Mr. Speaker. And I want to warn, Mr. Speaker, the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. I've seen some books where they define a family, a man and a woman and children. They define a man with children, a woman with children, which are single families. But they go ahead and put a man and children. Then they go ahead and put a woman and children, Mr. Speaker. We should not allow Kenya Institute of the Curriculum to bring respectfully bad manners into our society. The day, Mr. Speaker, and I want to paraphrase what Yoweri Kaguta Museveni said, the day a man and a man will give us a child, then we shall agree with this Western importation of nonsense, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, finally, is to support that we need a regulation. And of course, I agree with Senator Kamar that we need a biodata and have in place, Mr. Speaker, the register for easy confirmation. And then finally, Mr. Speaker, I've seen the senator. I didn't know he has not placed us anywhere as Parliament and as a Senate, Mr. Speaker. Because what we need is, I can see, to persons with this shall in consultation with most representative registered. Mr. Speaker, where I have seen in all closest Senator Kamar through the Speaker, you have insisted only on you have not given us the role of Parliament, Mr. Speaker. We need to know the role of the Senate and Parliament in this process going into the future. And I know Senator Okia Okoitio Mutata Andrew is in court because of such matters. So we are, Mr. Speaker, we are slowly legislating ourselves out of business. Let me use out of business. We are slowly legislating ourselves out of our role as envisaged under Article 96. So we don't want to be relying at the mercy and charity of Senator Okoitio Okia Mutata Andrew to go to court to try and create our own space. This is the right time where we can create our own space, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't know why the Senator of Mombasa is heckling. I know he has missed Mandamano, but he hopes that what happens in Bomas collapses. Mr. Speaker, what I'm just saying is that let us legislate ourselves into our work that we give ourselves, so that we don't go to court. I know Minority Leader was present, Senator Faki was there. We don't need to be every day, we force you, Mr. Speaker, to march from here, and I know you are physically fit. We had to march from the Senate gate all the way to Milimani because we were just fighting over what we should be doing. And I know at that time, Senator Otsosi were enjoying himself in the National Assembly. With those many remarks, Mr. Speaker, allow me to second, not to second, to support and say all the best and congratulations.
Senator Mwaruma.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa hii fursa. ili kuchangia mswada ulioletwa bungeni na Mheshimiwa Profesa Margaret Kamar unaoitwa Kenya Sign Language Bill, unaonuia kupeana uhai ibara kadhaa katika katiba ya Kenya. Ya kwanza ni ibara ya 53 ambayo inapeana haki ya kila mtu ama kila Mkenya kupata elimu ya msingi na ya lazima. Ibara ya 54 ambayo inapatia Wakenya wanaoishi na ulemavu haki ya kupata elimu, Mheshimiwa Spika, na ibara ya 35 ambayo inapatia wananchi haki ya kupata habari. Kwa muda mrefu hatujakuwa na sheria na sera ambazo zinaangazia vile wananchi wanaoishi na ulemavu wa masikio ambao wanaitwa viziwi vile wanasoma na vile wanapata habari. Mheshimiwa Spika, huu mswada unapelekea kuandika sheria hii ya Kenya Sign Language Bill ambayo itazingatia vile wanafunzi watakavyosoma, wale wanafunzi ambao wako na ulemavu wa kusikia. Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Spika, wakati wa kufanya uhusishaji ama public participation katika huu mswada, wengi walifurahi na wakasema kwamba huu mswada kando na kutunga sheria na sera utatoa pia hamasa kwa wananchi wetu na taasisi mbalimbali za kiserikali na zile zisizo za kiserikali ya kwamba kuna watu na kuna wananchi wanaoishi na ulemavu wa kusikia, na hawa wananchi wako kwanza kabisa na haki ya kupata maarifa na ujuzi utakaowasaidia katika maisha yao, ama kwa kizungu kupata knowledge and skills zitakaowasaidia katika maisha yao. Mheshimiwa Spika, na nashukuru Mheshimiwa Profesa Kamar na mwenzake ambaye walileta huu mswada hapa bungeni, ambaye ni Senator Kristo Lasige, kwa sababu nikiwa mmoja wa wale ambao wako katika kamati ya elimu ya Senate, tulisema kwamba basi ni vyema kuwe na vifaa vya kutosha vya kuhakikisha kwamba hawa wanafunzi walio na ulemavu wa kusikia wanapata masomo bila kubaguliwa na waweze kushindana na wenzao ambao hawana ulemavu wa kusikia. Kwa hivyo katika mashule kuwe na vifaa vya kutosha, na wale walimu ambao wanawafundisha wao wamefunzwa vizuri katika taasisi zetu za elimu. La pili, Mheshimiwa Spika, ni kwamba wazazi wa watoto wanaoishi na ulemavu wa kusikia pia wafunzwe lugha hii ya sign language, kwa sababu wakati mtoto amezaliwa anajifunza mambo mengi kupitia kwa lugha. Sasa kama yule mzazi wake haelewi na mambo ya lugha ya sign language ama lugha ya ishara, basi kumsaidia yule mtoto kukua vizuri na kusoma mambo ya shuleni itakuwa ni ngumu sana. La tatu, Mheshimiwa Spika, ambalo linaangaziwa katika hii sheria ni kwamba lugha ya ishara itambulike kama lugha yoyote Kenya, kwa mfano Kiingereza, Kiswahili. Kwa hivyo huu mswada unapelekea kutambuliwa ama kutaka kutambuliwa lugha ya ishara kuwa lugha ya tatu katika zile lugha ambazo zinatumika Kenya. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa Spika, huu mswada unasisitiza ya kwamba katika taasisi za kiserikali na zile zisizo za kiserikali ziweze kuweka mikakati ya kutosha ili wakalimani ama watafsiri wa lugha ya ishara waweko. Mfano, Mheshimiwa Spika, katika vyombo vyetu vya habari na Senator Wambua amesema ni kwamba TV kama Citizen, wale ambao wanatazama hiyo TV, kuna mkalimani pale anaitwa Yula Nzale. Kwa hivyo yule msomaji wa taarifa akiwa anasoma, kuna mkalimani ambaye anaelezea kwa lugha ya ishara maana ya yale ile taarifa ambayo inatolewa kwa Kiingereza ama Kiswahili. Na katika koti zetu, Mheshimiwa Spika, huu mswada unasema kwamba ni vyema tuwe pia na watu wa kutafsiri ili kila mmoja aliyeko katika ile koti aweze kuelewa ni mambo gani yanayoangaziwa. Na Mheshimiwa Spika, ningeongezea kwamba katika bunge letu la Senate na National Assembly, ukiangalia hapa ni kama tunaona ya kwamba kwa mfano wale wanafunzi wako pale, hakuna yeyote ambaye ana ulemavu wa kusikia. Na kama kungekuwa na mmoja ambaye ana ulemavu wa kusikia, basi hangeelewa vile ninavyosema. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa Spika, ni vizuri kupitia huu mswada tuweze kuwa na mikakati ama kuwe na sheria ama sera za kuhakikisha kwamba katika taasisi za serikali ama zile zisizo za kiserikali tunaweka wakalimani ambao watakuwa na tafsiri katika lugha za ishara. Na tukiwa na mtu ambaye anaongea kwa lugha ya ishara, pia kuwa kuna mkalimani ambaye anatafsiri ili wale ambao hawana ulemavu wa kusikia pia waweze kuelewa ni mambo gani, Mheshimiwa Spika, yanayojadiliwa. Mheshimiwa Spika, katika huu mswada pia unaelezea ya kwamba ni vyema kuwe na msajili ama umeweka msajili wa watafsiri ambaye atasajili wale interpreters ama wakalimani ambayo wa ishara, wasajili wa watafsiri wa lugha ya ishara na Wizara ya Elimu. Kwa hivyo lazima kuwe na huyo msajili, na wale watu ambao watakuwa wakalimani wao wana sifa fulani ambazo zimewekwa na Idara ya Elimu. Mheshimiwa Spika, ningependa kuhamia hapo, lakini niseme kwamba ninaunga mkono huu mswada na ni wakati mwafaka wa kupitisha huu mswada, na nijiunge na wengine na kuwasihi wale wenzangu ili waunge mkono huu mswada na upite. Hii ni mara ya pili huu mswada ulikuja katika Senate muhula uliopita, tukaupitisha na ukaenda kwa nyumba ya National Assembly, lakini ukafilia kule. Kwa hivyo tunaomba kwamba saizi uende kwa haraka upite hii nyumba na pia uende kwa National Assembly upate pia kupita. Nashukuru Mheshimiwa Spika kwa hii fursa.
Senator Faki.
Asante Bi Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii pia kuchangia mswada wa lugha ya ishara ambao umeletwa bungeni na kolabo ya Senator Sige na Senator Kamara. Mheshimiwa Spika, mswada huu utasaidia pakubwa.
Senator Zana, do you have a point of order? Okay.
She was raising her hand so that you can get her attention.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I just wanted you to consider gender when selecting who speaks. Thank you.
Yes, Minority Leader.
Speaker, umesikia ndugu yangu akisema kwamba aliingia kolabo na mtu mwingine. Kwa hiyo nilikuwa nataka pengine kuuliza kama hilo ni neno ambalo tunalitumia hapa ndani ya bunge au sivyo, na ikiwa sivyo basi aweze kuliondoa ama kulifutilia mbali neno hilo, atumie neno la kisawasawa.
Senator Faki, please withdraw the use of the word collabo. We don't know what that is. Proceed, please. Senator Hezena would want to confirm that Senator Tobiko was actually scheduled, but we are also following the queue. Thank you.
Mheshimiwa Spika, neno kolabo ni neno ambalo latumika Kiswahili, lakini kwa kuwa sijakuwa tayari kujibu hoja ya nidhamu ya kiongozi wa wachache, nitaondosha neno hilo, lakini nitapata fursa siku nyingine ya kulijadili kwa kirefu na kwa kina. Mheshimiwa Spika, mswada ulioko hapa ni mswada muhimu sana kwa sababu tumeona kwamba katiba yetu imetoa haki nyingi sana ambazo wananchi wanastahili kupata, lakini kwa sababu ya kutokuwa na sheria za kuweza kurahisisha haki hizi, imekuwa vigumu wananchi kuweza kupata haki hizo. Moja ya zile haki ni haki ya kuweza kupata lugha ambayo itaeleweka kwa yule ambaye anazungumziwa ama anayezungumza, ili iwe mawasiliano yanakuwa rahisi. Mheshimiwa Spika, tumeona kwamba kumekuwa na ongezeko la matumizi ya watu wanahitaji lugha ya ishara, na japokuwa wazungumzaji wa lugha za ishara wako, lakini bado hawajafikiwa kiwango cha kutosha ili kila mtu aweze kufaidika. Mheshimiwa Spika, nikitoa mfano, katika mahakama kuu ya Mombasa kwa muda mrefu ilikuwa mwenye kutumia lugha ya ishara ilikuwa ni mtu mmoja peke yake ambaye alikuwa anatakana kutafsiri. Akaondolewa koti ya Mombasa akapelekwa koti ya Kaloleni, na alipopelekwa koti ya Kaloleni kwa kesi nyingi zinalemaa ama zinakwama kwa sababu hakuna mfasiri wa lugha ya ishara. Kwa Mheshimiwa Spika, mswada huu utasaidia pakubwa kuongeza watu wanaozungumza lugha hii ya ishara ili iwe ni rahisi kuweza kuendesha kazi ama kuendesha mambo kwa wale ambao ni watumizi wa lugha hizi. Mheshimiwa Spika. Mheshimiwa Spika, jambo lingine zuri ambalo litaletwa na lugha hii ni kwamba tutapata wazungumzaji wengi wa lugha za ishara, ambapo itakuwa ni rahisi kuweza kumpata mzungumzaji wa lugha ya ishara ili kuweza kufasiri yale mambo yanayozungumzwa na wale ambao wanaelewa lugha na wanasikia kama kawaida. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa kumalizia ni kwamba ni fursa nzuri kwamba mswada huu tuupitishe. Kama alivyozungumza Seneta Mwaruma, ni kwamba tulikuwa tumeupitisha katika bunge la Senate, ukienda ukafa katika bunge la kitaifa. Na safari hii Mheshimiwa Spika, lazima tuongeze juhudi kuhakikisha kwamba mswada huu umepita katika jumba la kitaifa pia, ili hiyo ina sheria inayotumika katika nchi yetu tukufu. Asante Mheshimiwa Spika.
Senator Seki.
Honorable Speaker, I also want to put my voice to support this bill on issues of that talks about sign language. This bill we have come across in the Education Committee. They want to support because it's a very good bill that will help our people. As you know, the bill has highlighted quite a number of issues, particularly objectives to promote education, quality education, and it provides for training for those people, particularly for the teachers in our primary and secondary schools, who are also handling people with disability. This bill is a bill that will promote disability to our people in our counties particularly. This is a bill that will see the light of the day, particularly on the county governments. We have seen county governments struggling to support people with disability. But this bill will come in handy to help the county governments to get direction on how to protect the people with the disability. I know most of the counties are struggling. Most of the people with disability are also struggling. Just the other day, I was in Ngong, in one of my sub-counties in Kajiado County, where we had more than 300 children in pre-primary school who are affected, who have issues on different areas, particularly eye, and other areas of disability, particularly on even getting crutches and all that. This bill will protect these people with disability, and I want to say that it will also help county governments to budget, a national government to budget some allocation, to have an allocation in their budgets so that they focus on areas of equipments that is now in these schools. It will also help county governments to budget, help county governments and national governments, and all areas that have all people with this, who are also affected, will have an issue, will bring a solution to them. So I think, let me just stop with that, but I think I want to support, and say thank you to Professor and Honorable Asige for coming up with this bill. Thank you very much, Speaker.
Senator Hezana.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise to support this bill by Honorable Senator Professor Margaret Kamar on the Kenyan Sign Language. And Madam Speaker, I want to bring a different perspective to this bill and why we must all support. Because, Madam Speaker, the sign language is a language, basically, that everybody can speak, whether educated, whether illiterate, or from whichever tribe or whichever race you come from. And, Madam Speaker, knowing very well that we live in a country where negative tribalism has caused a lot of tragedies within our nation, I see a potential of the sign language bill eradicating these barriers and creating nationalism, a spirit where the whole country is united, and it will eradicate the negative tribalism. Madam Speaker, and also let us note that you do not become disabled by choice. A lot of times it's because of an accident or circumstances and occurrences you cannot control. And Madam Speaker, having been blind at some point in my life and having been handicapped in that I couldn't walk while I was growing up as a young child, I know for a fact that continuous and further marginalization of the deaf people in this country and all PWDs generally is the worst kind of injustice that we can do as humans to humanity. Because, Madam Speaker, we will be suppressing their human rights, and enacting this bill into action, Madam Speaker, would mean that we will be tackling 3 SDGs. SDG number 3 on good health and wellness, and number 8 on decent work and economic growth, and Madam Speaker, SDG number 10 on equality. Madam Speaker, it is important that as legislators in this country and people mandated with powers to protect human dignity, that we all support this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And before I forget, Madam Speaker, a lot of PWDs are considered outcasts in so many communities. And if you look, there is a direct correlation between the communities that consider PWDs as outcasts and illiteracy and marginalization and minorities. And these are the communities with the highest percentage of illiteracy. Madam Speaker, if the sign language can be introduced and made mandatory in every village in this country, then we will be able to restore human dignity across all other spectrums. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Thangwa.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity to also throw my weight in supporting this bill. And I also want to thank the Senator Kamar and Senator Asige for seeing it fit to bring to this floor of this House this bill that is requiring that sign language should be introduced in schools, Mr. Speaker. Madam Speaker, sorry. When I was an MCA, Madam Speaker, there was a friend of mine who was visually impaired and a nominated MCA. And every time, because he was very colorful in speaking, he could tell us that if Jesus was to come to his town and he hears that he is healing people, he would run away to the other direction because he was comfortable the way he was. So by bringing this bill, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, we are not feeling sorry for anybody. What we are doing as a House is to give everyone an opportunity as given by the Constitution. Madam Speaker, we should start from this House. I think our starting order, as Madam Speaker, allows English, Swahili, and sign language as the official languages, Madam Speaker. We should have an interpreter in this House. All the standing orders of county assemblies, 47 of them, they allow 3 languages, English, Swahili, and sign language, Madam Speaker. So we should also emphasize that the county assemblies should provide the interpreters for those people who cannot speak or hard in hearing, can be following what is happening in county assemblies. At least for us, we are lucky. We are able to go live and we have an interpreter on TV. But county assemblies do not go live on their debates. So for you to follow what is happening at the county assemblies, you attend in person, physically. So by providing interpreters in those county assemblies, anybody who understands the sign language, or you are deaf or hard in hearing, Madam Speaker, you'll be able to follow. Madam Speaker, this bill is just bringing about inclusivity. By saying that, I mean we are going to remove the communication barrier. You know, sometimes you're with somebody who's deaf, you cannot communicate beyond just saying hi. Madam Speaker, somebody would want to share their stories. And since we cannot understand that, we are not able to communicate with such a person. But if this was in school, Madam Speaker, when we are in school, when we are in primary school, when we are in high school, it will be very easy to communicate with anybody. We'll be able to have a conversation with a deaf person. Madam Speaker, I don't know whether you know, the reason why they say the Chinese are very creative is because they use the chopsticks. I don't know whether you have ever tried to eat using the chopstick, just lifting a grain of rice and lifting a potato or anything. You realize that it requires some art. It brings about critical thinking. And that is what the sign language does, Madam Speaker. It brings about critical thinking. Because the moment you are talking with your hands, gestures, you are speaking without speaking, you know, without sound, it brings about, it encourages critical thinking. So our children will be critical thinkers immediately once this is introduced in primary school, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this bill by itself will provide career opportunities because TSC will have to employ all over the country people who can speak using sign languages because they have opportunity as teachers. And it doesn't mean you have to be deaf. As long as you understand the sign language, you get an opportunity. So I always see when we have international conferences, like the climate summit that we just had, we had so many people who were speaking in sign language. That is an opportunity that somebody lost just because they cannot speak the sign language, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, and I want to support Senator, the Queen of North, by bringing that aspect off. Because you cannot speak English, Kenyans think you are dumb. Because you cannot speak good Swahili, everybody thinks you should, you know, just not speak Swahili. People even say Kiswahili changu kibaya, but nobody talks about their English. So to remove this barrier, everybody will have an opportunity to speak with a language that every other person can understand. And now we remove those barriers, stigma, that if you cannot speak in English. By the way, if you speak in language, you are seen as, you know, more human than anybody who is speaking any other language, Madam Speaker. So I support this bill. It has come at the right time. And I ask my fellow colleagues to support it so that we can create an opportunity for everyone when it comes to matters communication. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Senator Osotsi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity to also express my views on this very important bill, which is long overdue. Madam Speaker, I want to start by congratulating Senator Margaret Kamar for this very, very important bill that is before us. Madam Speaker, as it has been said, this bill actually was passed in the last Senate, but it lapsed in the National Assembly, and therefore we have to reprocess it. Madam Speaker, maybe it's an opportunity for us to address this problem. The issue of Senate passing bills which go to the National Assembly and then they stay there, then eventually they lapse. And likewise, bills which are passed by the National Assembly and then they come to this side and they lapse. I think it's an issue that both houses must sit down so that the efforts of members of Senate or members of the National Assembly are not wasted because of petty disputes between the two houses. But Madam Speaker, going to the substance of this bill, I want to say that this bill is very timely because, as you are aware, Madam Speaker, that this bill is about Article 7.3b of the Constitution, which provides the use and promotion of sign language as one of the languages in this country. So it will help us actualize this particular article of the Constitution. Madam Speaker, we also talk about Article 54 and 56 of the Constitution on the rights of marginalized persons, particularly persons with disability. So this bill, Madam Speaker, will go a long way in actualizing the provisions of the Constitution in relation to marginalized person or persons with disabilities. Madam Speaker, though we talk about sign languages, many of us think that sign language is just one language across board. I am surprised when I was doing research on this bill that there are over 300 languages, sign languages, globally, which makes me think that maybe we need to harmonize sign languages so that we have one language across the world. So that we don't have an American version of sign language, we don't have a British version, we don't have a French version, we have one language. Because we must have an easy way in which this category of people are able to communicate with each other. But at the same time, sign language is just like any other language. It has grammar, it has rules of grammar. So it is actually a language on its own, which can be interpreted differently depending on where you come from. But I think global efforts should be put around developing a uniform sign language so that we can have an international standard around this. Madam Speaker, we also look at sign language as the form of communication between people who have speech impairment or people who have hearing impairment. But sign language can also be used by people who do not have this challenge. For example, Madam Speaker, if you are from different languages, maybe this can be an opportunity for you to express, you communicate among yourself without having to learn another foreign language. So it applies in both cases if you look at it, Madam Speaker. But most importantly, Madam Speaker, this bill has really tried to address all aspects of application of sign language, where it has talked about having this sign language applied in education, having a curriculum on sign language, and I think this will help in promoting quality of education among people with this challenge, Madam Speaker, because in the normal environment, they are disadvantaged. So by having a curriculum in place for these people. They will be able to learn in a better way. They will be able to maximize their potential, unlike having to learn in an environment where we do not have a curriculum in place. Madam Speaker, coming from the technology world, I know a number of my colleagues have not talked about this, but this has also been reflected in the bill about the use of sign languages in telecommunication. Madam Speaker, this is very important because in this digital era, I think it's important that we integrate sign language in our technologies. For example, in a Kenyan environment where almost 85% of people use mobile phones or telephony, it is important that the telecommunication network providers provide access to their network to persons of hearing challenges or deaf people. And recently I saw Safaricom making an attempt in this area by recruiting trainers or teachers of in this area. But I think more can be done. Looking at what happens in other countries, like in the US, we have a substantive law that deals with technology and hearing impairment, what we call the Hearing Aid Compatibility Act, which ensures that the technologies in place, especially in telecommunication, are all aligned to ensuring that persons with hearing impairment are able to access these services. Madam Speaker, it is also important to ensure integration of sign language in the healthcare. And I think it's important for doctors and health personnel to be trained in sign language so that they can be able to manage deaf patients better, so that they can get information from deaf patients, or the deaf patient can be able to communicate effectively with the persons providing health care to them. Madam Speaker, I know my colleagues have talked about education in terms of teachers. Madam Speaker, we have a serious problem in development of teaching resources in the special education in this country. Just last week, Madam Speaker, I visited TSC with some teachers from my county who have stagnated in one grade for so many years. For so many years. There is a particular case of a teacher who had even served as a principal of a school for 4 years, only to be told that you need to go back to classroom because you have not been upgraded to this. Madam Speaker, these are challenges that demotivate teachers pursuing this kind of specialization, and therefore leads to further discrimination of people with disabilities. So, Madam Speaker, this is one area that needs to be looked at. But at the same time, Madam Speaker, I think all teachers must undergo sign language training. All teachers, so that they can communicate effectively with learners, whether they have this disability or not. So my view is that we need to come up with a policy to ensure that as part of the process of training of teachers, they must be taken through sign language training so that they are able to understand different categories of their students, those who are naturally fit and those who also have these disabilities like hearing disabilities. Madam Speaker, this is a very progressive bill. Kenya now joins the rest of the world, 41 countries which have integrated sign language in their laws. I know we have it in our constitution, but now we are going to have an act of parliament to operationalize what Article 7 of the Constitution requires us to do. Madam Speaker, with those few remarks, I want to support this bill and say that this bill is very progressive for this country, and it will now officially make Kenya have 3 national languages. That is English, Swahili, and then sign language. So I support this bill, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
There's no one else to contribute, and I'd like to ask the mover to reply.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. May I begin by thanking all members who have contributed to this bill. We have had Senator Alwale, who seconded, Senator Wambua, Senator Gerard Gay, Senator Maruma, Senator Faki, Senator Kanero of Kajiado, Senator Azena, Senator of Kiambu, Senator Osotsi. I want to thank each one of them for supporting the bill. This bill, as was summarized by Senator Osotsi, is a bill that is progressive. It's going to move us further. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, a number of issues have been tight, and we are going to look at how to even strengthen them at the committee stage. Madam Speaker, Kenya will be one of the first countries to have their own sign language. As was mentioned by one of our colleagues, we have the American Sign Language and we have the British Sign Language. The reason, and that is the reason why we called our sign language the Kenyan Sign Language, because the others have been labeled and they have very slight differences in some of the signages. So we wanted to have our own, which might be an indigenous African language that will be enjoyed by other countries. Madam Speaker, now that we are beyond the integration of the East African community, that we are going for the African continental integration, it is important that as we pass this bill, we sell it to members of parliament from other countries. This is not going to be new for Kenyan members of parliament to do. We did that for the climate change bill. We initiated it in the 10th parliament, and it started spreading like wildfire in the partner states of the African Union. So it is possible that we'll be able to sell this, and it will be a very nice product from Kenya. I am happy that most members who have contributed are supporting that we should actually teach sign language as our third language so that we operationalize what is in the Constitution. If that is a third language, Madam Speaker, we know very well.
Senator Professor Kamar, how far are you? Because we want to interrupt.
3 minutes.
Okay, it's granted.
3 minutes.
Please proceed.
Yeah, so Madam Speaker, it is very important that we train our children. When children are very young, and I said this earlier, they can learn Spanish, learn English, learn Kiluya, and they learn all of them, and they don't even mix them. So teaching them sign language is very important, and more because of the interactions that they have with these children. So it is very important that we do that. I also am very happy that most members have supported that we make it a course in the training institutions, so that even beyond devolving KISE, we don't have to devolve KISE, we can actually devolve the chapter on sign language to every TTC, And if that is done, then every training institution will be able to do that. Madam Speaker, I guess when we come to the committee stage, if there will be any other additions from any members, we'll be able to welcome. Otherwise, I want to thank each and every member who has contributed. I want to thank Senator Asike, and in particular, again, thank Senator Musuruve, who was actually the author in the last parliament, and I was, I am the one who moved the bill with her, but she was the champion. So I really want to appreciate her and appreciate everybody. Thank you, Madam Speaker. With those remarks, I beg to move.
Senator Kamar, would you wish to defer?
Thank you.
It is so deferred. Honorable members, Senator for Mombasa, Senator Faki, rose on a point of order earlier today to move a motion of adjournment on a matter of urgent importance. I now call upon Senator Faki to move the motion.
Mheshimiwa Spika, nimesimama kuambatana na hoja ya nidhamu. Nimesimama kwa hoja ya nidhamu kuambatana na kanuni namba 37 ya Bunge la Senate kuomba kwamba bunge liahirishe ratiba yake ili kujadili swala ambalo ni la umuhimu na lina umuhimu wa kitaifa, ambalo ni hali ya usalama katika kaunti ya Lamu, ambayo imesababishwa na matokeo hivi majuzi ya mashambulizi ya majangili wa Al-Shabaab. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwanza kabisa ningependa kusema kwamba japokuwa masuala haya yanatendeka Lamu, mjadala wangu ama maelezo yangu hayahusiani kwa vyovyote na siasa za Lamu. Ni muhimu kwamba ieleweke kwamba hatuzungumzii siasa za Lamu hapa. Tunazungumzia masuala ambayo yanatendeka Lamu, lakini yanaleta athari katika sehemu nchi nzima kwa jumla, na hususan kaunti yangu ya Mombasa. Kwa muda kama miezi miwili, Mheshimiwa Spika, mpaka sasa Spika, tumeweza kuzika askari karibu 10 wa jeshi letu katika kaunti ya Mombasa. Jumatatu iliyokwisha, ilikuwa tarehe 11, tulizika kijana mmoja wa miaka 22 na mwingine alizikwa sehemu za Tiribe katika kaunti ya Kwale, ambaye pia alikuwa na umri kama huu. Mheshimiwa Spika, kumekuwa na ongezeko la visa vya mashambulizi ya kundi la kigaidi la Shababu katika eneo la Lamu. Mheshimiwa Spika, itaeleweka kwamba Kenya ilikwenda Somalia mnamo mwaka 2011 mwezi wa 10 ili kuzuia kundi hili la Al-Shababu kuweza kufanya mashambulizi katika nchi ya Kenya. Lengo lilikuwa ni kuweka ile Kiingereza wanaita buffer zone kati ya mpaka wa Somalia na mpaka wa Kenya, ili mashambulizi yasiweze kufanyika Kenya. Shambulio lilikuwa limefanyika Lamu wakati huo, Mheshimiwa Spika, ambapo mtalii mmoja aliuawa na bibi yake akatekwa nyara na majangili hao. Mheshimiwa Spika, japokuwa lengo hili lilikuwa ni nzuri, Mheshimiwa Spika, lakini kwa muda uliopita imeonekana kwamba sasa tumeweza aidha kulegeza kamba na majangili hawa wameweza kuingia mpaka katika kaunti ya Lamu, ambapo wanafanya mashambulizi kwa kadri wanavyotaka. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa sasa imekuwa karibu kila wiki kuna visa vya mashambulizi kama haya, na kuna vijiji ambavyo vimefanywa mahame katika sehemu fulani za Lamu, ambazo zote hizi zimeweza kusababishwa na majangili hao. Mheshimiwa Spika, japokuwa Mheshimiwa Spika, lengo la mwanzo lilikuwa ni zuri kwamba kuweza kuleta amani katika sehemu ya kusini ya Somalia na hususan mpaka wa Kenya na Somalia katika kaunti za Garissa, Mandera na kwengineko mpaka Lamu. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa sasa imekuwa ni tabu kubwa kwa kaunti hizi zetu, kwa sababu mashambulizi yanafanyika karibu kila wiki. Mheshimiwa Spika, tulipata mafanikio fulani kwanza tulipoingia jeshi lilipokwenda Somalia, kwa sababu liliweza kuidhibitisha ama kuisawazisha Somalia na ukawa na usalama, ili kuruhusu nchi kujijenga. Vile vile Mheshimiwa Spika, ilisaidia kuongeza maeneo ambayo yalikuwa yanamilikiwa na serikali ya Somalia. Na mpaka sasa Mheshimiwa Spika, tuna serikali kamili katika nchi ya Somalia. Na tuliweza pia Mheshimiwa Spika kuzikomboa miji kadhaa ikiwemo mji wa Kismayo ambao ndio bandari kubwa ya Somalia. Mheshimiwa Spika, mbali na Mogadishu, katika mji wa Kismayo kuna bandari kubwa ambayo ndio kama mji mkubwa katika eneo la kusini la Somalia ambapo biashara nyingi inafanyika katika eneo hilo. Mheshimiwa Spika, lakini mafanikio haya pia yameweza kuzibwa na zile hasara ambazo tumeweza kupata katika nchi hiyo. Mheshimiwa Spika, tukiangalia Juba Valley ambao ni sehemu ambayo inalindwa na askari wa Kenya ambao katika kikundi katika jeshi la AMISOM, yani African Union na mission in Somalia. Eneo hilo Mheshimiwa Spika ndio eneo kubwa ambayo ndio headquarter kubwa ya kundi hili la kigaidi. Mheshimiwa Spika, tumeweza kuona kwamba kila mwaka wameweza kufanya mashambulizi, na tuliweza kuona mashambulizi yaliyofanyika katika Garissa University, wale ambao waliuliwa katika zile quarry, sehemu zingine, mabasi kadhaa ambayo yanakwenda Garissa na kwingineko yaliweza pia kushambuliwa. Ile kambi ya jeshi ya Kenya katika eneo la El Ade mwaka 2016 ilishambuliwa na karibu askari 200 wakapoteza maisha yao. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa hivyo ni swala ambalo ni donda sugu, limekuwa donda sugu kwetu sisi watu wa Kenya. Mheshimiwa Spika, tumeona pia Mheshimiwa Spika kwamba kila siku zikienda hakuna mpango wowote wa serikali Mheshimiwa Spika kueleza ni lini wataweza kuondoka Somalia. Kwa sababu sasa Somalia kuna nchi kamili, kuna serikali kamili, iko na jeshi lake, iko na polisi wake, hata kuna wakati waliweza kujaribu kuvunja uhusiano wa kibalozi na nchi ya Kenya. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, hatuoni sababu gani sisi tusilinde mipaka yetu badala kwenda katika nchi ya mtu na kukaa huko. Tutashambuliwa sisi hapa kwetu, hatuwezi kujilinda, na watu wetu wengi Mheshimiwa Spika wameweza kupoteza maisha ambayo yangeweza kulindwa. Mheshimiwa Spika, hivi majuzi mbunge wa bunge la kaunti ya Lamu, bibi yake alipoteza maisha, naye mwenyewe alishambuliwa akajeruhiwa vibaya katika shambulizi la hawa majangili. Mheshimiwa Spika, kaunti zetu kama kaunti ya Lamu, na Lamu inafanya biashara kubwa na Mombasa Mheshimiwa Spika. Vitu vingi ambavyo mazao mengi yanatoka Lamu kuja kuuzwa Mombasa, na kuna vitu ambavyo vinatoka Mombasa kwenda kuuzwa Lamu kama vile mchele, mafuta ya kupikia na vinginevyo. Hivi Mheshimiwa Spika, inalemaza biashara baina ya kaunti ya Mombasa na kaunti ya Lamu Mheshimiwa Spika. Vile vile Mheshimiwa Spika, wakulima wameweza kutatizwa na mashambulizi kama haya, na kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, kaunti zetu hizo tatu ama zinashindwa kutekeleza mipango yake ya maendeleo. Spika, hivi majuzi Mheshimiwa Spika, pia katika mwezi wa 8 jeshi la Somalia katika Somalia walipambana na Al-Shabaab huko ndani ya Somalia, wakapoteza askari 2. Wale askari wa Somalia walishindwa kuzikwa katika Somalia, wakaja wakazikwa upande wa Kenya. Walizikwa siku ya Ijumaa, na nafikiri waziri wa ulinzi Mheshimiwa Duale alihudhuria hayo mazishi ambayo yalifanyika Kenya. Askari wa Somalia wanazikwa nchi ya Kenya. Ina maana kwamba kule kuna sehemu zingine ambazo wale Al-Shabaab ndio serikali, kwa sababu ikiwa wanaweza kuzuia watu wasizikwe, ina maana kwamba wao ndio serikali kwa upande wa kule. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, tungependa kusema kwamba imekuwa sasa ni tatizo kubwa, kwa sababu tunapoteza vijana wadogo Mheshimiwa Spika. Kijana wa miaka 22 amepata kazi mwaka uliokwisha, anapelekwa mstari wa mbele, anapoteza maisha yake. Wazazi labda walikuwa wamewekeza, kwa sababu siku hizi kupata kazi ya jeshi Mheshimiwa Spika, huwezi tu kwenda uwanjani ukaajiriwa jeshi Mheshimiwa Spika. Lazima kutembee mapeni, na sio chini ya 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 kwingine. Kwa Mheshimiwa Spika, zimelipwa 300,000, lakini tunaona kwamba kwa muda wa mwaka mmoja askari ameweza kupoteza maisha yake. Kwa Mheshimiwa Spika, tunasema kwamba lazima serikali itupe mwongozo ni lini wataondoka Somalia, kwa sababu bila ya hivyo tutakuwa tunaendelea kupoteza wanajeshi wetu, tunaendelea kupoteza vijana wetu. Mheshimiwa Spika, usalama unadorora, na hii inasababisha kwamba watu hawezi kuishi maisha yao ya kawaida katika maeneo yale. Mheshimiwa Spika, ningeomba kukoma hapo na kusema kwamba ni muhimu kwamba serikali iweze kutoa mwelekeo wa kuondoka katika Somalia ili turejee katika mipaka yetu, tuweze kulinda nchi yetu. Hatuwezi kulinda nchi yetu kwa kuwa tuko katika nchi nyingine. Tulinde nchi yetu kikiwa tuko katika nchi yetu. Mheshimiwa Spika, ningemwomba Seneta wa Lamu aje kuniunga mkono. Thank you.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika kwa sababu ya kunipatia fursa niweze kuchangia pia katika mswada ambao ni muhimu sana ambao unahusiana na usalama katika nchi yetu na hususan kaunti yangu ya Lamu. Mheshimiwa Spika, ningependa nishukuru Mheshimiwa Faki kwa sababu ya kujadili ama kuleta mswada huu ambao unaguzia sana sana usalama wa nchi, na pia vile vile Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi pia niweze kuingilia na niseme kwamba mimi kama seneta wa kaunti ya Lamu ambayo pia imeathirika sana na mambo ya usalama, ningependa niweze kusema kwamba natoa risala zangu za rambirambi saa hii Mheshimiwa Spika kwa maofisa wetu wa usalama ambao usiku wa kuamkia leo waliweza kupoteza maisha wakiwa katika harakati za kulinda nchi. Ndege ambayo walikuwa wanasafiria ya kufanya surveillance, Mheshimiwa Spika, ikapata matatizo ikiwa juu ya anga, na hatimaye Mheshimiwa Spika, hao wanajeshi wawili wakaweza kuaga dunia. Ningependa nitoe rambirambi zangu na niseme kwamba ni watu ambao ninawajua kwa sababu Jumatano iliyopita ya wiki ambayo imepita, Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi niliweza kusafiri na ile ndege pamoja na wabunge wengine tukielekea sehemu ya Lamu Mashariki kwa sababu ya kutathmini hali ilivyo ya usalama katika kaunti yetu ya Lamu. Na Mheshimiwa Spika, niseme ya kwamba ni jambo la kuhuzunisha sana wakati ambapo watu wetu wanaendelea kupoteza maisha, maafisa wetu wa usalama pia vile vile wanaendelea kupoteza maisha. Ningependa niweze kusema ya kwamba serikali ambayo saa hii tuko na imani kubwa sana nayo iweze kuangalia hali ilivyo ili ione kwamba imeweza kusaidia katika jambo hili la kutatua ama kutegua kitendawili hiki. Mheshimiwa Spika, nataka nipongeze maafisa wa usalama kwa sababu ni vijana wetu ambao saa hii wamejitoa kihali na mali kulinda nchi yetu. Na katika process ya kulinda wananchi na nchi yetu, unakuta pia vile vile wao wanaangamia. Mheshimiwa Spika, vile vile pia wananchi wangu hawajaachwa nyuma. Mheshimiwa Spika, wiki ama mwezi uliopita tulipoteza mama ambaye ni mke wa MCA wa ward ya Hindi. Mheshimiwa Spika, hilo ni jambo ambalo limehuzunisha sana kaunti yangu ya Lamu, na pia vile vile niseme ya kwamba wiki kama miezi mbili imepita, kuna watu ambao wameweza kuchomea manyumba yao katika sehemu ya Juhudi, Salama na Widho. Wale wananchi wamechomewa majumba, Mheshimiwa Spika, mpaka saa hii tunapoongea bado kuna IDPs ambao wako katika kaunti yangu ya Lamu. Mheshimiwa Spika, hili ni jambo ambalo linahuzunisha sana, ikizingatiwa ya kwamba tuko na serikali ambayo inafaa itulinde kulingana na mujibu wa katiba na sheria za nchi hii. Ningependa nitoe wito kwa serikali iweze kuona kwamba imeendelea kufanya mujibu wa sheria na katiba ya Kenya ya kulinda wananchi pamoja na mali yake. Na niseme ya kwamba Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi nina support sana kuweze kuwekwa mikakati rasmi ambayo itaweza kuwa na permanent solution ya kusaidia watu wangu wakazi wa Lamu. Na Mheshimiwa Spika, niseme ya kwamba kuna barabara ambayo serikali imesema kwamba itazikata za kutenganisha wananchi na sehemu ya Boni Forest. Mheshimiwa Spika, naunga jambo hilo mkono na nasema kwamba serikali imefanya jambo la busara na kwa haraka zaidi ili tuweze kusave vile maafisa wetu wa usalama. Nikimalizia, Mheshimiwa Spika, ningependa pia serikali iweze kupurchase vyombo ambazo ni za kisasa ambazo zinaweza kudetect landmines ambazo zinawekwa zinasababisha wanajeshi wetu waweze kupoteza maisha. Kwa hayo mengi, Mheshimiwa Spika, na support mswada huu ya usalama wa nchi na hususan kaunti ya Lamu. Asante Mheshimiwa Spika.
Honorable members, I propose the question that pursuant to Standing Order 37, the Senate do adjourn to discuss a definite matter of urgent national importance, namely the security situation in Lamu County, heightened by the recent attacks by suspended Al-Shabaab militants. We will now contribute for not more than 5 minutes each. Senator Ali Roba.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise to support that motion on the issue of security situation in Lamu County. And Madam Speaker, I would like to expound that issue even further, to be able to really give the context within which we discuss the existential threat that is facing the population of Lamu, population of Mandera County, Wajir and Garissa County, as that is resulting from terror activities within our borders. Madam Speaker, the situation in the recent past, over the last 3 or 4 months, the frequency of occurrence of terror incidences and the severity of occurrence of terror incidences have really increased, particularly in Lamu County and Mandera County. And as such, we've had situations that the spillover effect of that has really affected many sectors beyond the threat of the lives of the population of these counties. Madam Speaker, in the past, the terrorists in the name of Al-Shabaab have been able to really create a situation where they really wanted to pit Kenyans against each other by saying we target only non-Muslims. And that issue, thanks to the Kenyan population as well as the government of Kenya, that could not see the light of the day. Because while they were making that statement in Kenya, but they were killing wantonly only Muslims in Somalia, and blowing up hotels and restaurants and joints of social event where only Muslims were doing business in that area. Meaning the intention then was to pit Kenyans against each other on the line of religion, where Kenyans will start fighting each other on the basis of Muslims and Christians. Madam Speaker, it is very important to give context to this issue, that we understand what is happening inside Somalia. Right now, the government of Somalia has put it as priority number 1 to eradicate Al-Shabaab out of Somalia. And sadly, many countries, spearheaded by Kenya, went into Somalia to try and really help our brothers and sisters in Somalia to build peaceful transition into a formal government. However, countries like our neighbors in Ethiopia have taken a very strategic decision where the security forces of Ethiopia were deployed along the border between Somalia and Ethiopia. But our Kenyan forces were deployed over 250 kilometers deep inside Somalia, leaving the line along our border and completely unpatrolled by security officers. Now what is happening in Somalia is pushing Al-Shabaab into our border and along the border because this is safe haven. The almost over 1,000-kilometer borderline between us and Somalia is where now they are thriving unchallenged. And they're able to cross and cause havoc and go back as it is happening right now. Madam Speaker, as I conclude, because I can see my time is running out, I would like to request, this requires Marshall Plan by the government of Kenya to be able to deal in order to liberate the northern Kenya region, including Lamu, from the hands of terror that is really causing economic alienation. Education sector is dead. We are not able to attract professionals to be able to work in our region. Private sector investment cannot come. And Kenyans have developed a mentality of stigma saying that region is good for nothing. Madam Speaker, it is about time the government of Kenya develops a Marshall Plan to liberate Lamu, Mandera, Wajir and Garissa from the hands of terror. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Senator Stewart Mazaya.
Asante Bispika kwa kunipa nafasi hii. Kitu cha kwanza Bispika, nataka niweze kupitisha rambirambi zangu kwa wale wote walioweza kupoteza maisha yao wakati wakitengeza ama wakifanya kazi ya kuweza kulinda nchi na kuangalia hali ya vile mipaka yetu inavyoendelea hapo juzi na jana, na wakapatikana na hasara ya kuweza pengine kupoteza maisha yao katika ndege. Cha pili Bispika, ni kwamba nataka niwapatie kongole wale maafisa wetu wa jeshi kwa kazi ngumu wanaoifanya, japokuwa wanapitia mitihani mingi, lakini wanaweza kuketi pale na kuona kwamba wameweza kutetea nchi yetu, hususan pale sehemu za Lamu. Lamu ni mahali ambapo pako na jamii zote za Kenya wanaishi pale, na Lamu ni mahali ambapo panatakana kuangaliwa vizuri Bispika, kwa sababu ni mahali ambapo panaleta uchumi mkubwa sana kwa upande wa utalii. Lakini tumeona kwamba sasa Lamu imeachiliwa mbali, na sijui ni kwa sababu gani. Sijui ni kwa sababu pengine kwa hivi sasa serikali iliyoingia haijali maslahi ya watu wa Lamu, na ndio sababu pengine wamewachilia namna hii, ndio visa kama hivi vinatendeka. Manake havikutendeka wakati ule wa serikali ile nyingine. Bispika, sana nataka kuunga mambo ya usalama katika Lamu. Bispika, tunaona Lamu vile ilivyojengwa ni mahali ambapo lazima paangaliwe kisawasawa, kwa sababu imejengwa ya kwamba wako watu wengine wanaishi katika kisiwa na wengine wanaishi nje ya kisiwa. Lakini wale wanaoishi nje ya kisiwa ndio wanapata tabu zaidi, na hususan pande za magharibi ya Lamu ambako kuna lile tunaita Boni Forest. Ndio watu wale majangili huwa wanatokea pande zile na kuja wanapiga watu kule na kuwaua. Watu ambao wameketi katika hao mashamba yao kwa miaka mingi na kuwaua. Hata imekuwa sasa hakuna mtu ambaye ana uhakika na kwamba anaweza kulala leo na akaona kesho. Kwa hiyo ni mambo ambayo tunasema ya kwamba serikali lazima izingatie sana mambo ya usalama, kuona ya kwamba watu wa Lamu wameweza kutetewa sawa sawa. Hatutaki kuona kwamba sasa badala ya kutetea watu katika maeneo kama yale, tunaona serikali hivi sasa wao wenyewe kwa wenyewe wanagongana. Mawaziri huyu anaongea namna hii, Kuria anaongea namna hii, yule waziri mwingine naye anaongea namna hii. Unapata ya kwamba pia yule economic advisor pia naye anaongea namna hii. Sasa unashindwa hawa utachukua wakati gani ambao wataweza kuangalia sehemu zile za ninio zinaenda namna gani za usalama. Kwa hiyo sisi tunasema kwamba wakiwa kitu kimoja, waone ya kwamba maisha ya watu wa Lamu yameweza kutetewa vilivyo. Hata tukiona ya kwamba hivi sasa tuko katika hali ya kupigana na hali ya uchumi. Bispika, kwingine kule watu wanakufa, watu hawana chakula. Chakula kinatakana kipelekewe watu kule katika maeneo ambayo yako na shida zaidi. kama maeneo ya Lamu hao tunaosema. Ni area ambayo iko na shida mingi. Kwa hiyo inatakana msaada upelekwe kule. Lakini ukiangalia hivi sasa serikali yenyewe haiwezi chakula chenyewe hakiwezi kushuka chini. Ni kwa sababu hali ya maisha imekuwa ngumu. Sasa hali ya maisha ikiwa ngumu na unapata ya kwamba wale watu wa Lamu wanaishi katika hali ngumu, inakuwa shida zaidi. Na Speaker, tunaona ya kwamba pia saa nyingine si vizuri kuona ya kwamba katika maeneo fulani kama ya Witu yameachiliwa tu hivi. Watu wanaweza ingia majangili, wakapiga watu, wakaua Wakenya, wakaenda zao wakapotea. Hatujasikia hata siku moja serikali imeweza kushika al-Shabaab mmoja wakasema huyu alikuwa akiongoza hao watu kwa kuua Wakenya ndani ya Lamu. Kwa hiyo tunasema kwamba serikali iamke, isilale, iweze kulinda watu wake na kuona kwamba haki imetendeka kwa watu wa Lamu. Asante Mr. Speaker.
Senator Wamatangi.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Senator Wamatinga.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I was just about to correct you, but then you realized that I'm Wamatinga. I also lies, Madam Speaker, in support of this motion. Madam Speaker, I happen to come from Nyeri, specifically Madeira constituency, where we tend to be honest and truthful men. Madam Speaker, in 2014, after the election, exactly 1 year after election, we had the same incidences happening in Lamu. Needless to say, the now governor was the governor then. Madam Speaker, it is in our memory that after he was arrested, the matter stopped. Madam Speaker, I would want to join my colleagues to condemn violences being perpetrated in Lamu against one specific community. This ethnic profiling, Madam Speaker, it is important we say it the way it is. It is indeed very unfortunate. One lady, who I happen to know, Madam Speaker, lost her family 2014. Now she has lost 2 of her sons who are left then. Madam Speaker, there is a common denominator, and we must face it and say it the way it is. Some of the violences that we saw for the blame on Al-Shabaab, they are people who have taken advantage of the same ethnic profiling and systematically eliminated a particular community. Madam Speaker, it was the same thing in 2014. Incidentally, the then governor, who happened to was re-elected again, is again sitting, and he is the governor again. Madam Speaker.
Just hold on, Senator. What's your point of order, Senator? Thank you.
Madam Speaker, I do not wish to interrupt my brother, Senator Amatinga, but he should not make allegations which he cannot substantiate. Nobody has mentioned any governor. Nobody has, even the senator for Lamu never mentioned any governor in his contribution to the debate. So he should not mention a person who cannot be called here to defend himself. If he has evidence that he is involved, let him bring a substantive motion and it shall be debated here and the government will give an opportunity to defend himself. He should not throw allegations at somebody who cannot come to this house to defend himself. He should withdraw those remarks, Madam Speaker.
Senator Wamatinga, as you allege anything, please proceed to substantiate. Otherwise, do not raise it on the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What I was pointing out, Madam Speaker, is the coincidence. Madam Speaker, we are in a free country where we are ought, and as readers, to point out facts as they are, Madam Speaker. We know in this country, be it the banditry, cattle rustling, most of the crimes that we see being committed, most of the violence that we've seen being melted out, it is indeed driven by political leaders. Madam Speaker, I said I come from Madeira, where we are truthful and honest people. And it is important that we point out and call it out the way it is. Madam Speaker, we must interrogate the coincidence.
Senator Wamatinga, kindly substantiate that the problems in Lamu are politically instigated, if that is what your assertion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It would be impossible to do that within the next 5 minutes.
In which case, please withdraw.
And what I would say, Madam Speaker, is it is important that we, as political leader, take it upon ourselves that the problem we have in this country is...
Senator Matinga, please withdraw if you're not substantiating.
Madam Speaker, given opportunity, I would lay the documents on this House that indeed in 2014 we had the same problem and somebody was arrested, Madam Speaker. Give me a chance, I come with the documents tomorrow showing that 1 year after election we had the same problem, 1 year after election we have the same problem again. Coincidentally, the same governor was the governor then. Madam Speaker, I'll be more than prepared to do that tomorrow.
Please submit your evidence to substantiate your allegations.
Well guided, Madam Speaker. As I go on, Madam Speaker, it is very important that we as leadership in this country stop sharing blame where it doesn't belong. Madam Speaker, a life lost in any part of this country, violence committed to any Kenyan in any part of this country, it's important that we condemn it with the heaviest terms that it deserves. Madam Speaker, I would want to say for so long, we fought the menace of violence